Chapter 569. In this battle, both sides used their skills. Burn Cinder of the City of Dawn had advanced to the legendary level. After using his transformation skills, he had the combat power of a legendary pinnacle. This gave Alfred and the fire element professional a headache. Burn Cinder was already difficult to deal with. Not only was he very strong, but his health points were also very fast. Normal injuries were useless against him. He could completely recover in a few seconds. Those who did not know better would think that he had William's blood flowing in his veins. As for William's 3 legendary heroic spirits, they held back 2 legendary experts. William faced Paul Bane and the 4 experts from the Godly Assassin Temple alone. In this group of people, there was a Spirit Great Enchanter, a Water Element Legendary Warrior, a Wind Element Ranger, and an Earth Element Grandmaster who was wearing boxing gloves. Without a doubt, this group of people had all kinds of close combat, ranger, mage, and meat shields. They must have been specially prepared for William to fight against the boss. But ever since William had the Heavenly Blade, he did not care whether the enemy formed a team or not. He did not care how tanky the enemy's Earth Element Grandmaster was. He just had to kill them. There was no choice. The effect of the Heavenly Blade was awesome. This blade could ignore battle energy shields, magic shields, and 30% of defense. In addition to William's endowment and skills that could cause true damage, his killing power was simply amazing. Paul Bane was a thunder and fire element professional. He wanted to compete with the god of war for the position of god. He had already embarked on the path of faith. He could not allow himself to fail. Otherwise, his faith would plummet, and he would have to embark on the path of God again. But even if he joined forces with the 4 legendary professionals to fight against the Lord of the City of Dawn, they still did not have much of an advantage. Mental Strangle, the Spirit Great Enchanter, shouted angrily. An invisible force suddenly appeared in William's mind. William felt his head shake, and his body instantly fell into a state of dizziness for 3 seconds. This was because he had the mental defense endowment. If not, he would have been unconscious for a longer period of time. Paul Bane, who had finally grasped the opportunity, instantly transformed into a shadow. He circled around William and slashed 9 times. His arms swelled up by more than one size. Thunder and fire elements frantically fused into the saber, causing each saber light to carry a rich thunder and fire-fighting aura. Each saber light was stronger than the last, and it could even easily tear space apart. This was enough to show how powerful these saber lights were. As for the other masked legendary experts, they also went all out and attacked the guy in front of them crazily. The Grandmaster of Combat, who was wearing boxing gloves, beat William until he was like a pitiful rag doll swaying in the air. One sentence. Even if they couldn't kill him, they had to cripple him. Unfortunately, even though William was in a coma, when his health points dropped to 50%, he still activated the endowment of immortality. Not only did his health points recover at a much faster rate, but his tankiness also increased tremendously. The Grandmaster of Combat felt that William's flesh was getting thicker and thicker. He felt as if he could not move at all. He could not help but curse. What kind of monster is the Lord of the City of Dawn? Why does his regenerative ability seem to be even stronger than that of the dragon race? Who cares what it is? Take my son, Extinguishing Arrow. The Wind Ranger sneered and took out an arrow that was surrounded by purple energy. It was a legendary arrow. It was a legendary bow. The ranger pulled the bow into a full arc. Just as William opened his eyes, the arrow shot into the sky. Buzz! Bang! A green beam of light streaked across the sky. Not only did it penetrate William's chest, but it also left a crater in the sea of sand. But that arrow had only caused William to lose 21% of his health points. William, who had regained consciousness, had already bitten the life potion in his mouth. He did not even use the resurrection armor before his health points were restored to full. The Wind Ranger was stunned. This was his ultimate skill. Even a legendary shield bearer would be severely injured if they were to take this arrow head-on. But this guy in front of him should be a ranger like him. What kind of monster was he? Many experts from the Killer God's Temple were also dumbfounded. They had come here confidently and thought that it would be a piece of cake. They did not expect such a person to exist in the legendary continent. He was not inferior to the reincarnations of the main gods. The prince touched his chest, which had recovered, and sneered at them. "Are you done? It's my turn. Take my blade." Buzz. William used Thunder Slash with his left hand and Heaven Suppressing with his right. He transformed into a bolt of lightning and dashed towards the Wind Ranger. The Wind Ranger's expression changed slightly. He shot out arrows that surpassed the speed of sound while he transformed into a tornado and retreated rapidly. Paul Bane and the Grandmaster of Combat surrounded William. But it was a pity. William's ultimate skill was not this. He activated the Thunder Domain, and the surrounding people were all affected by the Thunder buff. But because of these buffs, William could use Thunder Flash to travel through space and arrive in front of the Wind Ranger in one step. He attacked with both swords. Swish, swish. The heaven-suppressing blade broke the longbow that the Wind Ranger used to block the attack. The Thunder Slash slashed the Wind Ranger's head and went straight down his face. It was like a knife cutting through tofu, almost splitting the Wind Ranger in half. The Wind Ranger was shocked and angry. He felt that he had difficulty breathing. If he was not a legendary professional and had a middle-level elemental body, he would have died from that attack. Protect the Wind Ranger. Don't let the boorish William attack us. Paul Bane was shocked. He had not fought with William for a long time. How did William become so much stronger? The Wind Ranger's mouth twitched. How could a Wind Ranger attack a Face Ranger? But it was too late to say anything now, because when the Grandmaster of Combat rushed over, William turned sideways to counterattack. When the Grandmaster of Combat saw the heaven-shattering blade coming at him, the hair on his back stood on end. Out of reflex, he immediately punched the defenseless Prince William right in front of the Wind Ranger. The Wind Ranger tilted his head and was stunned. He did not wait for the Wind Ranger to look at the muscular prince who was about to shrug his shoulders. William smiled and slashed again. Light of dawn. Swish! The heaven-suppressing blade flashed across the sky. This time, no matter how the Wind Ranger tried to defend himself, he was still sliced into two by the heaven-suppressing blade. There was no way for him to survive. As for the corpses, William stuffed them into his space ring. He even had the chance to check them out. He was shocked. Damn, the Heaven's Blade special effect is too strong. The people killed by it can't be made into heroic spirit puppets. Many people were shocked when they saw this scene. A legendary profession had already fallen, and it was the Wind Ranger with the highest killing power among the five. The mental power enchanter clenched his fist and turned his head to scold. I asked you to hold him back. Why did you chase him away? It's a reflex. It's a close combat endowment. A soft persimmon like you wouldn't understand. The Grandmaster of Combat defended his mistake. You're a Grandmaster of Combat, a close combat professional comparable to a shield warrior. What are you afraid of? The legendary water warrior rolled his eyes. He joined forces with Paul Bane to surround the Wind Ranger. Although the Grandmaster of Combat was a little unhappy, he still said in order to win, be careful of his right-handed blade. It's definitely a divine weapon. It's a powerful divine weapon. When he slashed at me, I felt my heart palpitate. Coward, get lost. The water warrior scolded. His whole body was covered with a thick water shield, and he rushed forward. The Grandmaster of Combat wanted to stop him. An arm flew into the air. The water warrior retreated in fear. Luckily, he was a water professional. Even if he couldn't heal others, he could still use the water element to grow his arm. In just a few breaths, a new arm grew out. But no matter how you looked at it, this arm looked a little immature. It was obvious that its defense was weaker. The Grandmaster of Combat shrugged again when he saw the resentful look in this guy's eyes. I already said it, but you didn't listen. Now you've lost an arm, and you're blaming me? Especially since this guy was too confident in his own shield. Although the shield of a water professional was hard and soft, this guy was holding a divine weapon. At this moment, Paul and the others calmed down. They had definitely underestimated the handsome guy in front of them, because everyone thought that this guy had been bombarded by the weapon of misfortune. Coupled with his recent behavior, The news of the Holy Road being cut off should be true. But no one had expected that not only did this guy's combat power skyrocket, but he had also obtained a divine weapon out of the blue. I wonder which son of AB** TCH gave him such an awesome divine weapon, someone muttered to himself. Far away in the imperial palace of the setting sun empire, Du sneezed. His expression darkened as he looked at the water mirror technique in front of him, then glanced awkwardly at the saint experts of the empire around him. He laughed. Where's this blade? I know. His Majesty used it to exchange for a weapon of misfortune. It's not a loss. The religion of the sunset sage hall, Sunfall, said softly. Yes, it's not a loss, not a loss. Du forced a smile, but he could still feel the dissatisfaction of the kingdom's saints. This was because he had shamelessly begged a group of saints to help him forge this sword. The resources and various precious treasures he had used were uncountable. If not, how could it be considered one of the top 3 divine weapons in terms of killing power? But he had not even used it, and now it was being used by the Lord of the City of Dawn. Damn it, it was a loss. Although the Sunset Empire did not want the God-slaying temple to gain a foothold in the legendary continent, they did not have to give such a huge gift. But the religion of the Sunset Sage Hall had paid the most for this heaven-suppressing sword. Since this peak saint still supported Du, the other saints could only pretend that they did not care. At this moment, the battle scene was transformed into a water mirror in front of the 3 empires and the various elven kingdoms. When they saw the Lord of the City of Dawn using the unparalleled killing power of the heaven-suppressing sword and killing the legendary rangers, legendary water warriors, and even a mental strength grand enchanter, they thought that the City of Dawn would have the upper hand. However, following the opening of a space gate, a man in purple armor with a number 1 written on his mask walked out slowly. At this moment, many people's expressions changed slightly. Purple Armor 1. He was a peak legendary expert and an expert from the God-slaying temple who had seized the origin of the gods. 1. This meant that he was the strongest Purple Armor expert, the strongest legendary expert in the God-slaying temple. Chapter 570. With that, buzz, just as Paul Bane and the others were getting excited. Crack. When the boss attacked, the main character's defense measures would be useless. He had to take the attack head-on. Only then would the main character's counterattack be powerful. The Taboo Master's mouth twitched. It was no wonder that this starred was so arrogant. He was not afraid of the threat of the godly murdering temple. His sage father was really impressive. He had given his son 10 drops of blood essence, and he was not afraid that his strength would be unstable. Purple Armor glanced at Paul. His eyes were filled with impatience. The Taboo Master said excitedly, "It depends on who is coming. Lord Purple Armor is the strongest legendary warrior in the godly murdering temple. He is the best at dealing with professionals like the Lord of the City of Dawn who rely on divine weapons and equipment." But the Taboo Master's legendary gauntlets were shattered, and the bones in his hands were shattered. He wailed as he retreated. He even turned into a meteorite and fell to the ground. He could not come out for a long time. Purple Armor was speechless. He glanced at Paul Bane and said, "Shut up. I hate people who rely on their equipment to fight." The Taboo Master's nose was bleeding. He felt as if his head had been hit by a hammer. His body involuntarily flew back hundreds of meters. What kind of ability was that? William suddenly used the thunder battle energy to form an arrow and shot it. There was no difference between the two, but professionals who had obtained the origin of the gods had strange endowments. William had to be wary of them. After beating up the young one, the old one came. "Are you the boss in the novel? Can't you change your strategy?" He did not panic at all, no matter who fought with him. As long as they were professionals of the same level, their equipment and weapons were useless. The Taboo Master gradually came to his senses. He had been sent flying by a punch, and his mask had been smashed off. Fortunately, his lips had been flattened, and his teeth had fallen to the ground. His nose was bleeding, and no one could tell who he was. Subsequently, Holy Light Shield. The faint aura shocked everyone. But at this moment, come to think of it, gosh, William thought that the heavenly saber in his hand was a divine weapon and should be fine. But 1/3 of its attack power had been sealed, and even 2 special effects had been sealed. Caca. And when William was really in danger, Rogers would definitely appear to save him. But basically no one was willing to cause a battle between peak sages. A main god's powerful punch was simply too ferocious. It was so powerful that even his mother wouldn't be able to recognize him. Therefore, Aura, among them, his most awesome battle was when he stripped the armor of 38 legendary professions. He could be called a super crowd control skill on the battlefield. Especially after he became a saint, he instantly became one of the top 3 disgusting saint skills. It was arranged by players, but NPCs do not usually approve of it. The experts of Murdering God Palace decisively slipped away. It was true. Damn it, I don't need it anymore, okay? The prince grinned and threw all his equipment into the space ring. The prince's equipment and weapons had all lost their divine brilliance, and the runes of the chains had also appeared on their surfaces. For example, what was Odin's strongest talent? Would it be possible to directly seal god weapons and equipment? Therefore, the tentacle-like chains penetrated the defensive measures as if there was nothing there. They had already wrapped around his body and the weapons in his hands. Lord of the City of Dawn, are you interested in cooperating with the Murdering God Palace? We are a kind organization that maintains the peace of the God's continent. William did not say anything, but he muttered in his heart, I don't believe you. You're such a bad old man. Even a terrorist organization like you dares to say that it's for world peace. Isn't the Dawn mercenary team the peacemakers of the universe? Paul and William's eyes flashed with a trace of heartache. The latter could not help but shout in his heart, You forced me to do this. It's just so. It's just a top-notch equipment set. He doesn't have a single god weapon on him. This situation made many of the legendary professionals of the Murdering God Palace feel troubled. It was a pity that the Sage Shadow only glanced at them and said, A bunch of useless trash. If I knew that you were so useless, I wouldn't have cooperated with you. The legendary battle sword was shattered into pieces. But the prince's agility was higher, and his fist speed was faster. He continuously punched. But William had activated the power of the Saint Spirit. All his attributes increased by 45%, and he transformed into a Saint Spirit that traversed through space and punched. No sage, not even a peak sage, could kill William in a short period of time. It could be said that they were so scared that they almost peed their pants. The taboo master saw that William silently kept all his equipment. He smiled under his mask and said, Lord of the City of Dawn, you killed 3 legendary professionals of the Murdering God Palace. It's time for us to settle this score. Or, you should retreat from the City of Dawn and compensate us with a god weapon. If not, he would be invincible for a certain period of time. Bang, bang. The aura of a peak sage was faintly discernible. Oh, Paul Bain was stunned. He could not help but look at the equipment of the purple-armored veteran. Does that mean that the purple-armored veteran's equipment is better? Could it be that the equipment and the god weapon were used to seal himself? The heaven and earth resonated. Paul Bain immediately swung his sword. Just as he was about to slash William's head, William turned his hand and forcefully twisted it. Whether it was the taboo master, Paul Bain, the Grandmaster of Combat, or the spectators in the sky battlefield, they could not close their eyes. An arrow that could pierce through time and space shot straight at the taboo arcane master. William knew that the taboo master was a purple-armored veteran, and he might be the strongest legendary professional of the Murdering God Palace. But according to novels, animations, television dramas, and movies, this kind of person who pretended to be the last to appear would usually die the fastest. They had underestimated the power of the City of Dawn and William. In addition, Moses had yet to make a move. They could continue to fight. They could ask the godly murdering temple to increase their investment and send more legendary professionals over. In less than 3 seconds, the Murdering God Palace was the top power in the God's continent, but it did not mean that they could do whatever they wanted in any continent. If they had too many people, the local powers might not be able to tolerate it. But at this moment, Even though he had already become a saint, he still had 3 minutes of invincibility. That was a little overpowered. Not to mention anything else. Even a peak saint could not withstand an over-god's attacks for 3 minutes. This was what made Odin so awesome. What else? Lemus doesn't have any equipment for you to seal. Come. Let him seal your equipment. I believe that you can withstand it. Battle energy shield. An ear-piercing explosion rang out. But the purple-armored veteran reacted. He squinted his eyes and pointed at William. He shouted, "Origin forbidden skill, armor stripping." Countless professionals who were still fighting, and even those who were fighting on the surface, stopped. The taboo master narrowed his eyes. He had never seen such a despicable request. He immediately raised his hand and used the forbidden skill on Burn Cinder. During a battle, Burn Cinder's best ability was to seal the weapons and equipment of his enemies. Unless the enemies were far away from him and stayed on the surface for a few hours, they would not be able to unleash the effects of the equipment. But now, the high-level power of the Saint Spirit could last for up to an hour. It was not impossible for him to show off to them. Even if he dragged out the time, he could still activate the unparalleled Saint Spirit. Then, his aura would be even more powerful. He would not be able to scare these despicable foreigners to death. He could only take out a new mask and put on. He looked at William cautiously and said, "Is this your ability? The equipment is a seal. As long as you take it off, your aura will increase dramatically." The sages of the 3 empires could not help but mutter. What kind of terrible sealing ability was this? Why did it look so strange? When the 2 sages saw the purple-armored veteran, their eyes immediately lit up. They moved closer to him. The purple-armored veteran hurriedly said, "This person's divine weapon is very powerful. Please be careful, my friend." But at this moment, William took advantage of their distraction to suddenly unsheath his sword. He had no intention of listening to their boasting. The forbidden magic master was shocked. Magical shields appeared on the surface of his body. Blood spurted out from his chest, and his health points dropped by 12%. What was more exaggerated was that his maximum health points also dropped by 12%. He would not be able to recover for a long time. But the remaining Grandmaster of Combat also attacked at the same time. Both of his fists exploded in the air. With a ring-shaped shockwave, he smashed towards the forbidden magic master. He did not believe that the Lord of the City of Dawn, who had lost the heavenly saber, could still be a match for him. While the forbidden magic master was still hesitating, God, what kind of ferocious man was this? It cannot be helped. Suddenly, hundreds of rune chains appeared out of thin air tens of meters away from William. They rapidly closed in on him, and he could not avoid them. Bang! Tens of layers of shields appeared on the body of this super cautious prince. He could even block an attack from a sage. There were 2 types of members of the godly palace. They could become sages by training alone, or they could obtain the origin of the gods and become sages in a strange form. But before the forbidden magic master left, William heard a sentence. The sage, who was known as Scarab, looked at William and slowly said, "Very good. You have such powerful endowments and abilities. For the sake of the vitality of the gods' continent, the godly palace does not want you to die. I hope that in the future, you will be able to contribute. Purple Armor 1, bring your people away. Leave the legendary continent." William raised his eyebrows. Was it like this again? The forbidden magic master was furious. He held a legendary longsword in one hand and wore a pair of magic gloves in the other. He was about to charge at William. He wanted to fight with William cautiously. Paul's mouth twitched. It was just 2 punches. Why did he have to do that? William should be flying east, not down. His acting was too fake. Leave the group. William grinned. He remembered who this ** starred was. He should be the famous forbidden magic master of the Rune continent. Oh, it was the continent where the American players lived. Paul Bain, Wendy, and Alfred were dumbfounded. Nothing. I just feel that you are like the reincarnation of a god. The forbidden magic master laughed coldly, but he did not sense the aura of a god in William's body. The forbidden magic master frowned, but he still nodded and said in a deep voice, "Yes, my lord." As for the onlookers inside and outside the arena, They were also stunned when they saw this scene through the water mirror. In the end, the forbidden magic master broke the seal for him. At this moment, Paul Bane and the others were covered in injuries. Out of the 5 people who had surrounded William, only Paul and the cowardly fighter were left. William pointed at the 10 drops of his father's blood essence between his eyebrows. So what? William did not have any transformation abilities. Hence, even when he used the power of the Saint Spirit, he could not see any abnormalities. Burn Cinder, who was happily attacking with his Dragon Slayer sword, was stunned. His transformation ability was very strong, but his equipment had been sealed. He could not rely on his fists. If that happened, he would not be chasing after them and beating them up. Instead, they would be chasing after him and attacking him. A shadow slowly appeared, and the aura of a sage spread over a radius of 100 miles. Could it be that the Lord of the City of Dawn, without any equipment, was his strongest state? Oh my God! This uncaring pace, this aura, this masked man who only appears when all the enemies are dead. Is he the final boss? William secretly cursed in his heart. He could not help but tighten his grip on the heavenly saber. Prince William, when you are acting tough, can you not direct the hatred towards other people? Defensive magic scrolls appear at the same time. William raised his eyebrows and coldly laughed. Don't talk nonsense. You know very well whether I am the reincarnation of a god or not. Even if I am the reincarnation of a god, the murderous temple can send people to kill me. But if 7 or 8 or even more than 10 legendary professionals came, it would be too much. Chapter 571. The plan that the godly palace had set up in the legendary continent in advance had failed. It had even led to the death of 3 legendary professionals. However, the godly palace was a big organization. They didn't care about the people who had already been killed. They immediately retreated. Before they left, they even told William that they wanted to have sex with him. But William did not want to bother with this group of old men. The Sunset Glow organization did not dare to appear in the open, because they would be doomed sooner or later. He was not interested in befriending them. If he could choose to befriend them, he would choose the powerful Pope of Light, who gave him a sense of security. So he only wanted to take over the legendary mercenary team in front of him and make the City of Dawn the most powerful mercenary force in the legendary continent. He wanted to take over all the mercenary missions in the 8th and 9th levels of the legendary continent. Only then would he be considered one of the top 4 forces. He would be considered to have a firm foothold in the legendary continent, and he would start to plan for the entire God's continent. There was no need to think too much. Once the sages and legendary experts of the murdering God Temple left, even the twisted Paul Bane still wanted to fight. But Wendy and Alfred chose to surrender because of their looks. That was right. In a situation where they could not go against the general trend, these 2 legendary warriors who had not died in battle looked at each other. Alfred took off all the equipment on his body and pointed at the small lump on his chest. He shouted, "William, do you see? What I'm going to say next is the truth. We were all coerced. The Godslayer Temple and Paul Bane kept threatening and enticing us. Otherwise, how could we attack the City of Dawn? I'll ask my warriors to put down their weapons and surrender. Don't fight. Yes, we won't die like this. Ahem, we'll surrender now." Wendy revealed an awkward but polite smile. William raised his eyebrows and nodded at the 2 of them. "In that case, ask your warriors to put down their weapons." With that, just as William was about to fly towards Paul, he turned his head and smiled. "Welcome to the City of Dawn. After all, we don't have any grudges. I believe that this is the best decision you have made. Light and justice will always triumph over darkness and evil." Alfred and Wendy looked as if they had been saved by the light and hurriedly nodded. But in their hearts, they muttered, "Why did you remove the light and darkness from the mercenary war? You always put labels on your head. That's enough." But then again, with the City of Dawn's various propaganda and strategies, the citizens of the legendary continent believed that the City of Dawn was part of the light faction and not part of the neutral faction. After all, the 1,600,000 words of brainwashing finally made countless citizens believe that the City of Dawn was a powerful faction that could be trusted. The two of them had no choice but to surrender. There was no other way. The legendary mercenary group couldn't see any hope at this moment. The god-murdering temple had left them and didn't support them anymore. The City of Dawn would naturally choose to retaliate. If the two of them did not want to die, or if they did not want to give up their rights and leave the legendary continent, they could only choose to surrender. If they joined the City of Dawn with their subordinates, they would gain a lot of power and influence. Even if William was arrogant, he would not give up on the two legendary professionals. If they were to leave the legendary continent to develop again, who knew when they would be able to climb back to the peak? At this moment, Paul Bain's face darkened. He had already guessed that things were not going well. Wendy and Alfred might betray him. But the feeling of guessing and experiencing it was completely different. He was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He couldn't help but grasp his sword and pointed at William. "You very good, very good. As expected of my destined enemy. Just you wait. I'll be back." As he spoke, he transformed into a meteor and disappeared. But William narrowed his eyes and brazenly charged at him. "What did you say?" "I said that I would let you go. Are you worthy of being my destined enemy?" Paul Bain gritted his teeth and crushed the space teleportation scroll. But at the same time, William crushed the space imprisonment scroll to prevent him from leaving. Wendy also used her space grand enchanter abilities. She quickly waved her magic staff to prevent Paul Bain from entering the space tunnel. William glanced at him and said, "You are decisive. I'll give you an extra meal today." Paul Bain stepped into the air and fell into despair. But in his despair, he exploded with greater power. His entire body was surrounded by red thunder flames. He transformed into a meteor and roared as he charged at William. He was infuriated by William's words. William had said that he wasn't worthy of being William's destined enemy. He was jealous. He was jealous that the City of Dawn had been bombarded by the weapon of misfortune. But he was more unlucky than William. He wanted to grab the collar of the goddess of misfortune and ask her if they were related. Otherwise, why would she take care of the Lord of the City of Dawn? He was helpless. He felt that he was naturally restrained by William. He felt that William had walked all the paths that he could take, and he had nowhere else to go. William looked at the menacing Paul Bain. He didn't use any weapons. He only used a pair of indestructible fists to fight with Paul Bain. They didn't exchange blows, because William's fists could explode with lethality that was comparable to the Heaven's Blade. Even Paul's spare sword, which was of average quality, was damaged by William's fists. Half a minute later, D****. Kill me if you can. Good, I'll hammer you to death. 3 minutes later. Stop fighting. Stop fighting. I admit defeat. Paul felt a little pain after being hit by the cannon punches. He decided that as long as he was alive, there would be hope. He chose to surrender. "Quit, I didn't intend to kill you. You're still useful to me." William chuckled and grabbed the back of Fate's neck as if he were picking up a chick. Then he took out his ancestral legendary chain and tied him up. He hung him on a stick like a dead pig and stuffed him into a small alternate dimension that he carried with him. The mercenary war only lasted for 4 days before it ended quickly. This SSS level mission seemed very difficult for the players, but William was an NPC with a very powerful identity, status, and background. For him, it was only an S+ level mission, so it was far from being as difficult as he had imagined. The legendary mercenary teams on the surface battlefield all chose to surrender. Ding dong. Prompt: you have completed the SSS level mission, the Mercenary War. When all players received the quest completion notification, they excitedly checked their contributions and the various rewards they had obtained. William, the boss who issued the mission, had also completed his own mission. Prompt: you have completed the S+ level mission, the City of Dawn's Crisis. Prompt: your mission completion rate is 120%. Prompt: you have obtained the continent's legend level +1. Proof that you are a top force in the City of Dawn. Prompt: you have obtained the loyalty of the remaining 13 million legendary mercenary teams. Prompt: you have obtained 53 million experience points. Prompt: you have obtained the mission item Invitation to the King's Land. William looked at the many rewards on the information list and couldn't help but laugh heartily. The continent's legend level had increased by 1 again. He now had 5 legend level. He was basically a well-known figure on this continent. In addition, the legend level had some bonuses for accepting missions, doing business, and negotiating. Coupled with the super endowment of God of Looks, he was now a walking magic tool. Anyone who saw him would want to have a negative distance from him. The holy undead could not stop him. William would definitely not accept the loyalty of the 13 million legendary mercenary teams. But after some selection, he would be able to keep many of them. To a certain extent, the power of the NPCs in the City of Dawn would be strengthened. As for the loyalty level that others would worry about, His Royal Highness only needed to walk over and everything would be settled. That was how awesome he was. The experience points given by the mission were not little. But to William, it was just a drop in the bucket. It was only enough for him to level up by half. The most important thing was to exchange for equipment, secret manuals, skills, and experience from the instance dungeon. This was the fastest way to level up. As for the invitation to the King's Land, William had found it in Paul Bain's space ring. He narrowed his eyes. The King's Land? Are you sure it's not the Dead Canyon? Ahem. It seems like the godly murdering temple invested a lot in Paul Bain. They even sent out an invitation to this place. They seemed to have the intention to nurture him into a sage and even let him join the godly murdering temple. William thought of little Paul, who was tied up in the alternate dimension. He raised his eyebrows. But it's none of your business now. This thing belongs to me. What was the King's Land? It was an extremely mysterious small world. It had a large area and a complete space. There were many opportunities to become sages. However, it was full of dangers and had many forbidden areas. In addition, the door of the small world was not opened often. Legendary professionals with an invitation could enter, but they needed some luck to come out. But no matter what, this place was definitely 100 times better than the impassable continent. If the old legendary professionals wanted to advance further, they could only go to the impassable continent. Then, those with power, background, and legendary professions who could get an invitation could enter this relatively good King's Land. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. One was to force you to become a sage. If you did not become a sage, you would die. Otherwise, you would become a lunatic. The other was to see your luck. If it was possible, you would grow and even find the opportunity to become a sage. The small world was not owned by one party. It was controlled by the top forces and human empires of the 7 continents. The godly murdering temple was also part of the control of this small world. It was equivalent to one of the shareholders and had the right to give out a certain amount of tickets. And the time indicated on this invitation letter was 60 days later. Chapter 572. The City of Dawn's victory was due to the combined efforts of the NPCs and players. William generously gave them verbal encouragement and rewards. He gave away a bunch of worthless honors. Those who deserved promotions were promoted, and those who deserved medals received medals. Everyone was happy because William could see the smiles on their faces. It was obvious. Since ancient times, emperors and monarchs have been doing this. William was not the only one doing this. What about the players? What? Did they think that the players were greedy for equipment and gold coins? Yes. However, certain achievements and titles were also extremely difficult to obtain. In particular, the human empires were paying for this war. William only needed to give them some experience points. Then, according to the contribution ranking of the players, he would give out some titles with some attributes. As for the equipment, he could not afford it. He would have to use his contribution points to exchange for it. At his level, he could give out an unlimited number of silver quality titles, and this was a good opportunity. The silver title was called Guardian of Dawn. Its introduction was also of a higher class. Now, the players in the City of Dawn who had participated in this mission would have the title Guardian of Dawn. The newbies and the players who did not participate in this mission were envious. It's perfect. Not only can I save money, but I can also improve the cohesion of the players. It's not a loss at all. William felt that he had given the players a free ride. This war belonged to the City of Dawn, but he did not give the players an extra copper coin. But the losses are also significant. The City of Dawn lost a total of 180,000 soldiers in order to annihilate the 800,000 soldiers of the legendary mercenary team. William silently calculated the gains and losses in his heart. In the end, he had made a profit. He had not only annexed the legendary mercenary team, but he had also occupied some neutral towns and missions. If there were no changes in the legendary continent, even if William became a sage, the City of Dawn, as a top neutral faction, would reach its limit. At this moment, in the gathering hall of the City of Dawn, many legendary and epic experts were gathered here. There were also Alfred, Wendy, and the remaining 15 epic professionals. There were a total of 55 people who were above the epic profession level. After William's introduction, the veteran members of the City of Dawn reluctantly accepted this group of people who had surrendered. In fact, there was not much animosity between the two sides. The reason why they could fight was because of Paul Bane. Although in the battle on the surface, both sides had lost many of their former brothers, and they didn't seem to be on good terms anymore. But the City of Dawn was ruled by William. As long as he's the strongest, the system of the Overlord can't be changed. Whatever grievances you have, just keep them to yourself. However, there was also a problem with this. If they continued to accept and devour new members, it would inevitably lead to more and more factions within the territory. The conflicts would become greater and greater, and it might even lead to unstoppable civil strife and betrayal. But I have a cheat. William held his wine glass. He had just drunk a glass of wine from Wendy and could not help but reveal a confident smile, because the endowment of God of Looks was too heaven-defying. He could use time and looks to wear down the grievances of both sides. Sooner or later, they would become good subordinates who would only work for him. He was Yuri. He was the biggest brainwashing machine. Even if his subordinates could not become true friends and comrades, as long as they were loyal enough to him, he did not have to worry that they would harm the City of Dawn. On the surface, there would not be too many conflicts. That was enough. Moreover, it's better to have subordinates who oppose me. It can also stimulate their competitiveness. As long as they are of one mind with me, it's enough. The handsome prince tilted his head and looked at the moonlight outside. It was as if he was admiring himself. Wendy was completely attracted to the handsome man in front of her. She could not help but want to toast another glass of wine. She even had an impulse to interact with the man in front of her. If it was possible, she did not mind that after the banquet, but Saramis coughed softly and said in a very kind voice, "Prince William has someone else. If you continue to test him, you'll be done for." "Oh, that multi-elemental great enchanter called Moses?" When he looked back and smiled, Saramis coughed lightly. "Believe me, when I transform into the Time Dragon, I can 1v5, but Moses can easily 1v20 without any transformation. If it weren't for the martial sage, it would have been useless no matter how many legendary masters the magic sanctuary sent." When Alfred heard this, he did not believe it. If he's so strong, why didn't he participate in the battle a few days ago? Burn Cinder used his fork to stab a piece of dragon kidney. He smacked his lips and said, "Whether Moses comes or not won't change the outcome of the battle. Why? Do you really want to test the existence that we don't dare to provoke?" Burn Cinder and Saramis talked back and forth, frightening the two newcomers who had just arrived. This was because the performance of these two on the battlefield a few days ago was really extraordinary. Both of them had displayed the super strong combat power of the legendary realm. It was normal for them to fight one against many. But even so, they were still very afraid of Moses. It was obvious that this multi-elemental great enchanter was really not ordinary. In fact, Burn Cinder's fear of Moses was engraved in his bones. Who knew what kind of experimental product Moses would use after he was resurrected? He might even be chopped into pieces. However, Moses had been addicted to soul magic back then. If he was not careful, Burn Cinder's soul might be scattered. As for Saramis, he had seen Moses easily use time magic. That valiant standard was not weaker than his. In fact, it was even stronger than the extent of his transformation into the Time Dragon. It could be said that Moses could easily beat him up. The battle between the City of Dawn and the legendary mercenary team had directly led to the destruction of a camp that could have become a top force. This matter had a significant impact on the legendary continent. Many traveling bards who had received money kept on bragging about the City of Dawn. Many customers in the taverns who heard them wanted to vomit. The players also felt the joy of victory again. The City of Dawn had won again and had never disappointed them. This was the happiest thing. The most important thing was the scenes of the legendary and epic battles that day had been recorded by the live streamers who were riding on flying magical beasts. Prince William had fought against 5 opponents, killed 3 with his sword, punched and hammered a forbidden arcane master, and defeated Paul Bane. He was simply invincible in the legendary realm, especially when William took off his equipment and exposed his upper body, his perfectly defined muscles, and his face that people yearned for day and night. Many players of both genders were drenched in tears when they saw it. The videos and screenshots had also been uploaded to the official website by the officials. Many foreigners were envious and jealous. They only hoped that in the next version of the country war, they could have a good fight with the City of Dawn. They wanted to see who was stronger. If it was possible, the City of Dawn was a neutral force. Why didn't they develop in other continents? Actually, they also wanted to join in. The benefits were too good, especially the one that the core members were given to their wives. Prince William is a true melee ranger. He used the magic beans to transform soldiers. He's so cool. Haha, you bunch of despicable foreigners. I bet you didn't know that my fists are the hardest. Speaking of which, should we rangers take the melee combat route? Many of my ranger brothers have already refreshed their stats. I'm so nervous right now. They can only refresh their stats once a month. After they've refreshed their stats, they all say that melee rangers are the best. Of course I've finished. It smells so good. Don't turn, don't turn. ADC run. Woo woo woo. One of the companions who wanted to tell the truth seemed to have his mouth covered by fate. The most interesting thing was, actually, William had another reward. It was the instance dungeon crystal of the mercenary war. This instance dungeon crystal was divided into 4 levels of difficulty: easy, normal, difficult, and hell. The content of the easy difficulty instance dungeon was to re-enter the battlefield and fight against the legendary mercenary team warriors. It was a good place to farm equipment and experience points. Many players were immersed in this instance dungeon. They were so happy that they forgot about their duties. They felt that they would not come out unless they obtained a set of gold equipment. But a large amount of experience points and gold coins flowed into William's pocket. The content of the Hell difficulty instance dungeon was even more impressive. The players had to replace an epic expert in the City of Dawn and become one of the warriors. If they could survive until the end or defeat the local epic expert, they would be rewarded handsomely. The maximum number of players in this instance dungeon was 40. It did not matter how many players there were. They could even replace the epic saint, soul, heroic spirit. Even though they knew that they could not pass the Hell difficulty instance dungeon, many players still tried it. All sorts of men entered and exited the instance dungeon. They looked as if they had finished before they could even put on their pants. They lamented that they did not get to see Prince William's handsome face. Then they left the instance dungeon. Besides observing William's battle from a close distance, the players also wanted to experience the real situation of facing an epic professional. They wanted to see how long they could last. Oh, basically, they could only last for 3 seconds. They took a look. They did it. They died. So, if the players wanted to challenge the instance dungeon of a mercenary war, they could only choose the lowest difficulty. And after this mission was over, William entered a more relaxed period. The players entered a state of cultivation. There were no large-scale missions in the legendary continent, but there were always small missions. There were more and more dark creatures, and various stories about demon hunters would appear. Next, for a very long time to come, except for the war between the players in the next version. The NPCs would face a war between the light and darkness. They would fight to the death. This was the situation of the two worlds. There was no peace between the two sides. There was only nuclear war. Chapter 573. 1.5 months later, it was less than 3 months to the second year of version 4. The players of the 7 continents had entered the final phase of the main storyline mission. There were all sorts of decisive battles and final battles. The players were extremely busy. However, the players of the legendary continent were different. They had completed many fast-paced missions in the early and middle stages of version 4.0 and had earned enough experience points. The players who had entered the game in version 1.0 had entered the later stages of the advanced level. In the next version, they had steadily entered the Grandmaster level. On average, they were 3 to 5 levels higher than the foreigners. In the later stages of version 4.0, the Chinese players still had many missions. Besides the chaos of the dragon race, the other main storyline missions had basically been completed. This gave the Chinese players a lot of leisure time. Of course, this was different for each person. For the kings of hard work, it didn't matter if they had main storyline missions or not. They had to work for at least 25 hours a day. They were using their lives to exchange for time. That was how awesome it was. This was especially true after the main storyline quest was basically completed. For most players, they could finally relax a little. In addition, the legendary continent had established its foundation and prestige as a top power. Many of the tired players became tourists and started to enjoy the beautiful scenery of the legendary continent. At the same time, they completed some refreshing missions. Simply put, with the City of Dawn's label on them, they could go wherever they wanted, just like Mundo. As long as they were not in the forbidden areas of the Empire, very few forces would be able to stop them. Even NPCs from other forces would not be able to kill the players and steal their equipment. The benefits of having a strong faction seemed ordinary. However, if one had experienced it when the faction was weak, they would be able to feel the benefits. No matter where they go, they are respected. They are so confident. Forever Alone could not help but mutter as he looked at the hopeful gazes of the civilians in the town. That's right. The City of Dawn has established itself in the legendary continent. Speaking of which, this small town has a level A+ dark event mission. Why doesn't everyone feel anxious about it? That's right. Forever Alone frowned. It must be this place. Furthermore, the mission information stated that the people who were lost were children. However, many civilians did not notice it. It was as if they did not have children at home. After entering the town, have you seen any children below 13 years old? The others came to a sudden realization and shook their heads thoughtfully. The former said again, "Anyway, everyone, be careful. It might be a Grandmaster level demon. If we really encounter it, even if we have a lot of holy water, it will be very difficult to kill it. However, we will still lose 3 points every time we die." "No way, Captain. This is a Grandmaster demon. If it's a legendary boss, even our shield warriors might not be able to handle it." Many of the pro players felt a headache coming on. Gold and Millennium had created a 100-point system. During this period of time, the higher the player's score, the more resources the club would receive. These points could even determine whether or not they could participate in this year's World Championship. Therefore, some of the more experienced members felt awkward. They were afraid that the trainees would surpass them and replace them to participate in the international competition. However, Forever Alone only curled his lips. "It's the same for me. If I die, I'll also lose points. If my damage doesn't reach 20% of our 10-man party, I'll also lose points. It's very likely that I won't be able to participate in the competition." The other members were completely speechless. As a launcher, Forever Alone was the main damage output of the team. It definitely could not die. However, everyone's equipment was about the same. If he wanted to reach 20% of the damage output, he would need some skill. It was not that easy, because this was a 10-man party, not a 5-man party. But then again, the entire club depends on you. You don't want to go to the World Championship because you don't want to embarrass yourself, but the club can't let you. As they spoke, this group of people who had joined the Demon Hunter Union spread out. Through questioning, exploring, and using magic skills to find out the powerful demon that might be hiding in this town. And dark incidents like this happened almost everywhere in the 7 continents. Apart from the demon dens that could be seen everywhere in the wild, dark incidents happened everywhere in the cities and towns of the human and neutral factions. Even many towns and cities were likely to turn into nothingness in one night. The entire population of the city died and disappeared, leaving only an empty city for passers-by. In particular, such large-scale massacres had already happened 32 times in version 4.0, a total of 1.4 million people had died. And this all meant that the third wave of the underworld's invasion was about to begin. At the same time, Chu Yochio's team had also been promoted in the Demon Hunter Union because they had completed many Demon Hunter missions. They were even invited to the homes of some Demon Hunter NPCs who seemed to be comrades. Hence, in less than 10 minutes, this group of elites among elites, the super aces among the players, were all scared out of their wits. They ran for their lives, afraid that they would be tied up in the basement and become the BQ of this group of good friends. Xiao Ayan's face darkened. She felt that she had seen the most disgusting scene in her life. I don't understand why this stupid game can pass the censorship. I can't help but want to report it now. If reporting was useful, the gods would have been banned long ago. It's real. Since it's real, of course, we have to see it through to the end. Changli Jioga licked his lips and glanced at the door of his NPC friend's room with a reminiscing gaze. He seemed to want to go back and take a look. Disgusting, perverted, scumbag, shameless, despicable, and obscene. Xiao Ayan glanced at Changli Jioga and turned to leave angrily. Chu Yochio shrugged his shoulders and looked as if he had learned something new. He sighed and said, I didn't expect the girly Lawrence to have so many good things in his basement. A succubus, a vampire with an explosive figure, a vampire in female clothing, and even a female troll. Gosh, I can't help but feel that Lawrence is something when I think of the troll tied up. Exactly. He wants to invite us to experience real life. One of the team members grinned. His eyes were in a trance, and no one knew what he was thinking about. Speaking of which, I seem to remember that the intermediate vampire with an explosive figure was caught by us and sold to the City of Dawn. Chu Yochio and the others looked at each other. Gosh, there was such a thing. Could it be that the City of Dawn had secretly sold the vampire to these demon hunters with strange hobbies? MMP, as expected of His Highness, the handsome guy, he's an expert in the business world. He can sell anything. No wonder he asked us to capture him alive for the players of the legendary continent. In the later stages of version 4.0, there would be very few large organizations hiring them to fight against the dark creatures. Most of the time, towns and villages would pool money to hire them to kill the dark creatures. Alternatively, they would join the Demon Hunter Guild and kill the dark creatures in the vicinity through the notice board. They would then exchange the dark creatures for rewards and experience points. For the large guilds, it was to clear the devil's dens near the cities. Actually, this was a mission that would only start in version 5.0. The players should be engaged in the final battle of the main storyline mission. They had no time to deal with these things. However, as the main storyline mission of the legendary continent had ended, and William did not recommend them to participate in the plot of the Dragon Race's rebellion, most of the players started to experience the game life in version 5.0 in advance. That was the war between light and darkness. In the forbidden area of the Rainbow Lake in the City of Dawn, William entered the entrance of the small world opened by the World Tree alone. In an instant, the space changed. When William opened his eyes again, he found himself in a forest city. There were 70,000 pure-blooded elves living in the city. The environment was beautiful, and there was almost no external pressure. When he appeared in front of these elves, all the elves who saw him immediately stopped what they were doing and bowed. Greetings, my king. Dispense with the formalities. Do what you have to do. Remember to train hard. Countless female elves and men looked at him with respect. They nodded and said, Yes, my king. Mother World Tree has been reminding us that the outside of the small world is very dangerous. My king has been protecting us all the time. We will train hard and serve my king as soon as possible. Good. Disperse. Disperse. William waved his hand with a gratified expression. He watched as they continued to do what they had to do. This small world was like a mythical era. There were many magical beasts, animals, and plants from that era. Actually, it was not safe for ordinary people to live here. Fortunately, this group of elves was born to live in the forest. They were naturally good at dealing with magical beasts and animals. When they were born, they were all adults. Their attributes were not weak. In addition, their bloodlines were high, and the small world could be provided with magic by the World Tree. They even had many buffs from the World Tree. As a result, this group of elves could train very quickly. In just a few months, there were already elves who had become high-grade professions, which was faster than a F** King rocket. These 70,000 elves were the first generation of elves born by the World Tree. Among them, there were 13 elves with legendary bloodlines, 820 elves with epic bloodlines, and the rest had Grandmaster bloodlines. The World Tree is too powerful, and the bloodlines of the first generation of elves are too high. As long as I have time, I can create my own elven race, elven kingdom, elven empire, and even recreate the glory of the Second Era. William's eyes were shining. The World Tree had brought him too many things. The benefits were indescribable. He could earn 10,000 elves every month. This gave him the confidence to plan well in the Fourth Era, because he knew that as the version was continuously updated, the time span would become longer. He even thought of the future when he led several epic legions to attack. Actually, William was not afraid that this group of first-generation elves did not have the so-called courage. Since they were born from the World Tree, they'd been constantly brainwashed by the World Tree and himself. This group of elves was more loyal than anyone else. They thought that William was their guardian and their father. All of them had 1,000 points of loyalty. William was confident when he became a sage, when the World Tree was revealed to the gods' world. His name would resound throughout the gods' continent. He, a man who was going to become the Elven King. Chapter 574. His Royal Highness led a leisurely life in the later stages of version 4. 0. No one came to find trouble with him, and he did not intend to do so either. He spent his days wandering around the houses of his two girlfriends. Whenever he was free, he would watch the stars with the goddess of Ink and taste the food that she had personally cooked. Even if he was poisoned to the point that his HP bar appeared, His Royal Highness would still eat all of it with a smile on his face. Otherwise, he would look for the little princess to touch her hand and ride his unicorn around the grasslands of Stormy Island. TSK. His life had reached its peak, and he couldn't be any more satisfied. It could not be helped. The entire city of Dawn, which had a population of tens of millions of people, belonged to him. Every morning, he had to wake up from his bed, which spanned millions of square kilometers. Every time he went to the toilet, he had to ride the dust dragon to avoid a lot of trouble. Apart from completing quests and fighting, the Chinese server's players were left with the professional players to prepare for the Fourth World Tournament. Among them, the team with the biggest chance of winning the championship was naturally Glory. Chu Liuqiu had the title of the world's strongest tactician, and his various tricks were impossible to defend against. As the vice-captain, Xiao Ain's combat power was not weak. Coupled with her beauty, countless fans called her the strongest shield warrior. Needless to say, Changli Jioga was no longer a rookie. He was one of the top 3 warriors in the world, and his other 2 teammates were world-class players. After this tyrannical and unrivaled team won the world championship 3 times in a row, it really brought a lot of pressure to the pro teams in the other regions. In particular, every time the teams were divided into groups in the world competition, no matter which group Glory went to, that group would be called the Death Zone by those foreign veterans. But right now, there was also a huge problem within Glory. The pressure on the team members was too great. They were the champions in a row. They kept on winning. The glory of nearly 10 million players was entrusted to them. They couldn't lose. They couldn't lose, because if they lost once, they would fall more miserably than any other team. The key was that they climbed too high, so the fall would be more painful. Actually, this was something that could not be helped. Many players knew that the City of Dawn was renting equipment to the professional players. Since the prince had given his best support, if the pro players still lost, then the fans would definitely explode in anger. Recently, a post targeting Chu Liuqiu appeared on the forum. Chu Yochio is a pro player and the captain of glory. Isn't he a bit too arrogant? I heard that after he found a girlfriend this year, he rarely participates in the mock competition. The content of the post was obviously written by anti-fans. He found all sorts of faults. The player with the ID Little Dream didn't mention a single good point of Chu Yochio. He only focused on the little blemish he had in the past, as well as the issue of professional players having girlfriends. He also said that Chu Yochio was a 26-year-old man. If he really couldn't handle it, he should just retire. In any case, he had definitely planned this for a long time. However, if someone were to set the pace, there would be people who were too bored and ignorant. They would gradually lose the ability to think independently in the sea of online communication. Therefore, the thread attracted a lot of discussion among the players. There were even some irrational, assassin players who chased after Chu Yochio's girlfriend for days. Not only did they camp her corpse many times, but they also caused her to drop 3 levels. Level 3. It was easy to imagine how many times Chu Yochio's little girlfriend had died. At this time, the members of the Glory team and the flourishing Millennium Club were in the midst of a training match. Furthermore, Chu Yochio's sound transmission scroll revealed his location, causing him to lose the mock competition. However, no one said anything. It was just a break. Xiao Ayan walked to the side of Chu Yochio, who was resting, and sighed. Why aren't you looking at what sister-in-law sent you? Her equipment is probably going to be exposed. You should comfort her too. Forget it. Looking at it now won't solve the problem. I'll go and comfort her when I rest at night. In the future, as long as she plays with the core members of the Glory Guild, she won't be killed. By the way, I've already put the sound transmission scroll in the space ring. You guys can put it in too. Chu Yochio shook his head calmly. Was he going to miss the mock competition? That was a bit ridiculous. Little Dream was obviously an anti-fan. As for killing his girlfriend, it was obviously to mess with his mentality. However, he didn't have time to find that bastard, because only the world champion could erase all public opinion and black spots. After he retired, he would have all the time to play tactics with those bastards. He didn't believe that in the game that he was best at, he couldn't beat those little bastards who were secretly causing trouble. After thinking for a while, Chongli Jioga couldn't help but say, "Do you think it's those bastards from the Freedom Alliance? They've been causing trouble in the dark, and they've been exposed many times. However, I heard that many of them have re-leveled their accounts, and no one knows who they are. Now, they'll do anything that's detrimental to the City of Dawn. However, the City of Dawn isn't something they can mess with anymore." "I didn't expect them to mess with you," Chu Yochio smiled. "What's there to be afraid of? They're just a bunch of bastards. I'll let them mess with me. I just need to do well in the World Championship." "That's right. Calm down. Even if you have a mental breakdown, there's still golden era in the World Championship." Forever Alone walked over with his hand cannon and teased, "F***CK off. You could be the eternal third brother." Chu Yochio stood up and kicked at Forever Alone, who easily dodged it. Then he said, "Let's fight one more round and have lunch. Are you still training in the afternoon?" "We'll train with another team in the afternoon. You're not in your best condition. There's no pressure. It's too easy for you to win." Chu Yochio raised his eyebrows and did not say anything. He had some mental issues, but he believed that he could solve them. It was a problem with his girlfriend. It was not worth mentioning. If one shot was not enough, he would fire 3 shots. If it was still not enough, he would fire a few more shots. He had been a single young man for 26 years. His kidneys were good. Oh, actually, it was because he had hidden the treasure of kidneys well. William had obviously seen the posts, but he did not have the time to care about them. He had done his best to support the professional players. Whether Glory could obtain 4 consecutive victories depended on themselves. Because he had lost his leisure time, the door to the King's Land was about to open. If he entered, he might have to stay there for a few months. He might not even have the time to watch the World Championship. Burn Cinder looked at William, who was about to set off. He said enviously, "Prince William, you said that the King's Land is a treasure land with the most opportunities for legendary professionals. Is that true?" "Yes, there are all kinds of good items that can increase magic power and improve physical fitness. It's a pity that there's only one ticket. You can't go in and die." Burn Cinder pondered for a few seconds. Suddenly, he revealed a regretful expression and said, "Prince William, what if you don't return?" William narrowed his eyes. He stroked his chin and turned his head. In a deep voice, he said, "Don't worry. Before I die, I'll ask Moses to kill you as a sacrifice to the heavens. Accompany me to the Styx River." "Oh," Burn Cinder pouted. He was obviously concerned about the prince. Why did he have to say such hurtful words? "Prince William, have a safe journey," Serene said in a deep voice. "Have a safe journey." Alfred and Wendy also sent him off solemnly. William rolled his eyes. It was as if he was going to die. They had not even heard of the King's Land. Was there a need to be like this? Fortunately, he liked to raise flags in reverse. With this kind of reverse flag and his luck, he might be able to create some miracles in the King's Land. Subsequently, William left through the teleportation portal of the City of Dawn. The war-ending empire was one of the rulers of the King's Land. Ever since he received the invitation letter, he had contacted them. He intended to travel with the legendary experts who had tickets. But His Highness never knew who the person with the ticket was. When he arrived at the special teleportation hall and saw the 5 fellows, he suddenly felt like going home. It was possible that he would not return. The Sunset Empire's god of war, Alois. The Frost Empire's god of strength, Class. The War-ending Empire's thunder god, Thor. The War-ending Empire's good friend, Akalu. The War-ending Empire's reincarnation of the god of day, Hermera. As the War-ending Empire was one of the rulers of the King's Land, there were only 5 tickets. Hence, 3 of the 5 people were professionals of the War-ending Empire. The other 2 tickets were given to the Sunset Empire and the Frost Empire through PY transactions. But these 5 people, 4 of them were the reincarnations of gods, and 3 of them were the reincarnations of gods. What the F***CK? He could already imagine why many legendary professionals had jokingly called the King's Land of the dead. There were too many powerful people. Ordinary legendary professionals would be killed if they entered the King's Land. Akalorn did not have any enmity toward William. Both of them were good friends, but they did not want to team up. Both of them were top-notch legendary professionals, and they had their own pride. If they encountered something good, it would be a problem to decide who to give it to first. What if everyone wanted it? Hence, it was best for everyone to fight for their own interests. If they could save each other, they could help. But there was no need to walk side by side. The Thunder God, Thor, did not like William. If things went wrong, he might put on a show with William in the King's Land. The Sunset Empire's god of war, Alois, glanced at William. He seemed to have a problem with William capturing Paul Bane. Paul Bane had great potential and would be William's opponent in the future. As for the god of strength, Crass, he was eyeing William covetously. He seemed to want to take revenge. The god of day, Hermera, was one of the supporters of Crown Prince Peter. Although Peter had no chance of inheriting the throne, she was still a little indignant. Ahem, hello everyone. William greeted them awkwardly and did not speak anymore. Akalu smiled as he walked over and patted William's shoulder. The other 4 simply nodded and ignored him. Although they were from the same continent, if they entered the King's Land, they would be aiming for the opportunity to become sages. If they were not careful, they might start fighting over certain things. While everyone was waiting for the sages to open the teleportation portal, the Thunder God, Thor, suddenly looked at him and asked, "Where did you get the invitation letter?" The others also looked at William curiously. William did not answer. Instead, he grinned and asked, "What kind of place is the King's Land? You guys are very enthusiastic." Thor narrowed his eyes and sneered. "You'll know when you get there. Be careful not to be scared silly." William raised his eyebrows and suddenly smiled. "Do you think I won't know if you don't tell me? My MO told me all about it last night." Thor's expression changed, and he did not speak again. A trace of sadness flashed in the eyes of the god of war, Alois. The god of strength, Crass, was indignant. William clapped his hands in his heart. D***MN. That was what he had said. It was no wonder that a bunch of bastards were hostile to him. Back then, MO had sent a message, and all of them had gone to him. It turned out that they were a bunch of bootlickers. TSK, this face. William stroked his handsome chin. The onlookers wanted to beat him up. Chapter 575. Did Moses know where the king's land was? Obviously, she did not know. If she knew the exact location of this place, or had some information, she might really be able to tell William what to be careful of. However, with just Moses' divination and deduction, she really did not know where the place that was heavily guarded by many saints was. Thunder God Thor and the rest were backed by the human empires. They seemed to know where this place was. Perhaps it was a ruin left behind by the mythological era. So before William left, he asked Akarov about it. Akarov was William's close friend, so he did not hide anything. He told William all the information he knew. With William's memories from his previous life, he had a good impression of the king's land. It was extremely dangerous. There were also dead spirits transformed from fallen gods. There might be living gods, temple ruins, and unknown magical beasts from the mythological era. In conclusion, this king's land could be called the land of the dead because there were many dead souls from the mythological era. What shocked William was that this small world seemed to be related to the Styx River. It was a pity that he did not have much time to think. Grigory, the metal controller of the war-ending empire, had arrived. He was the chief warlock sage of the war-ending empire and the honorary dean of the Magic Academy. After the time gem opened the teleportation portal, he calmly glanced at William and the rest. He sighed and said, "Forget about telling you to be careful. I wish you good luck." Everyone nodded in unison and stepped into the water curtain. William felt as though he had entered a tunnel of light particles. He stretched out his hand and could feel the light particles colliding with his hand. Not only was there a slight prickling pain, but he also had an illusion of time. But he immediately raised his eyebrows. Prickling pain? His hand was the Lord's hand, but he felt a prickling pain. What were these light particles? Then he saw a few fellows in front of him nervously shrinking their bodies. They were afraid that they would bump into the surrounding light particles and create a few holes. At this moment, the prince understood. He had not entered a spatial tunnel at all, but a freaking time tunnel. That so-called small world, the so-called king's land, did not belong to this era at all. It was very likely that it was some strange place that had broken away from the river of time. As for why Ackler didn't tell him, he obviously didn't know either. But as a space-time professional, he naturally understood the dangers of this time tunnel. Grigory didn't say anything about the controller of metal. Perhaps he was trying to trick him. Well, although normal people would definitely not use their hands to touch these unfamiliar time particles. In this time tunnel, time seemed to have lost its effect. He did not know how much time had passed, but he felt his thoughts getting slower and slower. Maybe months, maybe years, maybe only a moment. Suddenly, Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. The 5 people from the time tunnel appeared in the empty space at the same time. A huge space-time rift appeared right in front of them. At the same time, small space-time passages appeared around them, and the professionals walked out of them one by one. After a while, 35 legendary experts appeared in this white space, plus 3 saints who guarded the space-time rift. William's expression changed slightly. They were all warlock sages. One was a time warlock sage, and the other 2 were space warlock sages. It was these 3 people who guarded this space and constantly reinforced the large space-time rift in front of them. This was the key reason why the gate to the king's land had not disappeared. The clothes of these 3 warlock sages were very simple, and their auras were very old. They did not even look at the group of people who came. It was as if they had experienced too much and had a feeling that they disregarded everything in the world. William could not imagine how long these 3 warlock sages had been guarding this place. But he also understood why this place needed to be controlled by the top forces of the 7 continents. It was because one force obviously could not spare so many time and space sages. I heard that it takes at least 1,000 years for each rotation. The time warlock sages are the most important. I was able to come here because these forces believe that my father and I have a chance to enter the sage state. If I can really enter the sage state, I have to promise them that I will help them guard this place for 1,000 years. Ackler transmitted his voice to William. I see. Then you have to work hard. When the time comes, just give me 2 tickets so that I can go in and take a look. The corners of Ackler's mouth twitched. It was enough to go to this place once. As for how many opportunities one could obtain, it would depend on one's luck. At this moment, the Time Warlock sage, who was dressed in a white robe, opened his eyes and glanced at them. Instantly, an invisible pressure came over them. Fortunately, this unknown Time Warlock sage was only checking the invitation cards that they were carrying. The Time Warlock sage glanced at William in surprise. He seemed to be a little curious as to why William did not walk with the people of the Shrine of Slaying, since he had the tickets to the Shrine of Slaying. But the Time Warlock sage did not meddle. He pointed at the space-time rift that was a few meters tall and said, "The King's Land might be a miracle born in the gods' world, or it might be an unknown place left behind by the mythological era. But no matter what, this King's Land must have been forcefully pulled out of the long river of time by a Lord God. It is now wandering in a world outside of the long river of time. Do you know what will happen if you leave the long river of time?" Many legendary professionals were either dumbfounded or did not want to answer. Only Akeler replied respectfully, "You will not rest until you die and live forever. But if you are unable to become a sage or a god, you will lose your consciousness and become an undead monster. You can only avoid this if you have the endowment of the Time Dragon." The Time Warlock sage nodded in satisfaction. "That's right. Are you the son of the city, Lord of Chaos?" "Yes, Lord Warlock Sage." "Very good. The chances of your father becoming a sage are too small. Although he has been here before, I feel that your chances of becoming a sage are very high." The Time Warlock sage smiled and said, "Go in. Don't explore too far away. Otherwise, you will lose your sense of direction in the chaotic time and space. Your teleportation scrolls will not be able to save you. Remember, you will have a total of 1 year in there. Enter from where you enter. When you are about to reach the 1-year mark, you will wait there. When that time comes, I will reopen the time tunnel. Otherwise, you will stay there and wait for the next opening of the King's Land. But I don't think you will be able to survive until the next opening of the time tunnel." Just as some careless legendary professionals were about to step into the crack of time and space, the Warlock sage said again, "After entering, calculate the time in your mind. Because the time inside is chaotic, you will not be able to feel the passage of time. There is no reference to tell you how much time has passed." Once he said this, the expressions of many legendary professionals changed. As professionals, they usually sense the changes in time based on their own feelings. This feeling had become a habit. Even if they had been training in seclusion for a few months, as long as they thought about it, they would know how much time they had spent. Even if it was the worst, it would not be too long. But this King's Land had obviously deprived them of their sense of time. What did this mean? It was very likely that they had lived in there for 100 years and were still ignorant. If they forgot to calculate the time in their mind, they might be trapped in there for the rest of their lives until they became a lunatic. But since everyone was here, there was no reason for them to leave when they were already at the door. The Time Warlock sage did not say anything else. He watched the group of super genius professionals walk in. He did not know how many of them would come back alive. William was worried that there was no time to calculate. Obviously, as a man who had the attributes panel, he did not have to worry about this. When William finally entered the King's Land, he saw a dark and misty world. There was no sun, moon, or stars above his head. As for his feet, it was a mass grave formed by countless bones, corpses, and tombs. It was boundless, and it was the same for a radius of 10,000 miles. This place seemed to have been a battlefield. Countless things had died. There were humans, elves, magical beasts, animals, angels, and giant dragons. The corpses of various types and eras were stacked together, forming a very strange scene. Not only did it look terrifying, but it was also very disgusting. William frowned. He glanced at the many white bones at his feet. It seemed that a long time had passed, but some of the corpses seemed to have died only a few minutes ago. William walked in front of a human corpse and reached out to touch it. The blood was still warm. *T. The corners of William's mouth twitched. This was indeed the land of the dead. It was a world without time. This corpse had been dead for an unknown number of years, but it was still warm. It was simply too freakish. Very soon, he saw a living creature. It was an epic specter. It seemed to have smelled William's aura and stood up. But just as William was about to capture him alive and see if he had intelligence, he wanted to interrogate him about something. The corpses in the mass grave woke up one by one. Advanced, Grandmaster, Epic, and Legendary auras kept waking up. More than half of the corpses in the mass grave had turned into undead spirits or some other strange things. They stood up and looked at William with eyes that were devoid of intelligence. They walked towards William step by step. The corners of William's mouth twitched. He silently raised his middle finger at these creatures. Then, he turned and ran. But what made William feel hopeless was there were several legendary space specters among this group of specters. They used their instincts to form a barrier that made it difficult for William to move. No matter how far he flew, he would fly back to his original position. William could not stand it anymore. He raised his eyebrows and said, "All right, if you want to play, don't blame me for using your corpses to make equipment." 1 hour later, William panted as he looked at the group of specters that had been scattered, killed, and reduced to ashes. They were gradually recovering. He could not help but feel afraid, because this group of beings had escaped the control of the river of time. They would not die. They would not die. This was not the land of the king. It was the land of the dead. They were not specters. They were a group of immortal specters. This was a world where countless specters lived. Chapter 576. William was a little afraid. As time passed, everything in a mass grave had been resurrected. In particular, there were more than a dozen legendary dead who had been resurrected. As time passed, the eyes of some of the dead gradually became spiritual. They were no longer confused and ignorant. They showed signs of wisdom. When they attacked, they were more decisive and even full of anticipation. His Royal Highness didn't want to call them the undead anymore, because they weren't afraid of holy water, nor were they restrained by the light, thunder, and fire elements. They were also good at all kinds of elemental combat energy and magic. It was like living in another world where only the dead lived. More importantly, the dead here could not die at all. Even if they were beaten into pieces, they would recover after an hour. So at this time, William did not hide anymore. He immediately activated the power of the Saint Spirit, and all his attributes increased by 45%. He transformed into a thunder body that penetrated the entire battlefield like lightning. The dead were smashed into pieces one by one. Before the dead could get close to William, they were smashed into pieces by the shockwave. Accompanied by the rumbling thunder, he smashed through countless obstacles and forcefully smashed the space barrier. He wanted to break out of the encirclement. But at this moment, the eyes of a legendary dead warrior suddenly lit up. He seemed to have completely awakened. His physique also increased by a few inches, and his whole body shone with golden light. He brazenly charged at William, who was at his peak state. Boom! The shockwave of thunder and golden light spread at an extremely fast speed. Wherever the shockwave passed, countless dead were turned into ashes. But this legendary warrior, whose body shone with golden light, also took a few steps back like William. There were no surface injuries on his body. Indestructible Vajra body. William inhaled a cold breath. This person had the same endowment as him. This guy was not a shield bearer or a grandmaster of combat. He was a warrior with very strong killing power. Almost needless to say, as long as any professional had the endowment of indestructible Vajra body, in terms of toughness, they would not be weaker than any legendary shield bearer. This kind of existence was a super powerful person with the potential of a sage. William's gaze changed slightly. He pulled out the heavenly saber and slashed. Swish! The thunderblade was like a solid substance. When it was about to fall, the latter suddenly pulled out a scarred battle sword from the void. The moment the two collided, the sword cracked inch by inch, clearly unable to withstand the heaven-suppressing saber, which was ranked third in terms of lethality. The ground beneath the legendary undead warrior's feet burst open like a spider web. But William's attack did not cause any substantial damage to him. He only managed to break a sword that was full of cracks, but when the two of them clashed, many legendary and epic undead experts surrounded them. To a certain extent, William was forced into a passive position. Just as the prince was wondering if he should use the body of holy lightning to escape, the legendary undead warrior in front of him glanced at the sword fragments on the ground and said, "Living people, you have once again trespassed into the land of the dead." The prince's heart sank. As expected, there was something wrong with the name Land of the King. This was clearly the land of the dead. In particular, the undead warrior seemed to have lived for a long time and knew that people had been here before. William panicked, but his expression was as calm as an old dog's. He said, "Oh, did someone say that living people are not allowed to enter this place?" The legendary undead warrior's mind was not too clear. After 3 seconds, he glanced at the surrounding legendary undead and said thoughtfully, "No one set the rules, but this is not a place for living people. This is our world, the world of the dead." "Yes, what do you want to do? Continue fighting? Besides you, I'll kill these crooked people next to you with one slash." The legendary undead warrior was not enraged. Apart from him, the awakened, there were only a few undead who had regained consciousness in this mass grave. Most of them were not very smart. They still needed to sleep or devour living things to wake themselves up faster. As for the rest of the dead, they relied more on their fighting instincts or biological instincts to attack the living. As the time of his awakening increased, he seemed to have completely regained his intelligence and gradually acknowledged William's strength. He looked at William coldly and said, "You should leave. Don't come back here. That's right. Since you appeared here, you might come back here and leave this world." The legendary undead warrior fell into deep thought again. He seemed to be considering whether to let the guy in front of him go. But he also understood that the living person in front of him had the same endowment as him, which basically meant that he had a half-immortal body. Although there were many legendary helpers around, there were too few awakeners. Some of the awakeners were not very intelligent. They were basically silly, and not all of them were legendary professionals. As for the rest of the dead who only had fighting instincts, they could not provide much help. In addition, the guy in front of him definitely had a lot of trump cards. Now that he did not have the urge to escape, it meant that it was useless to continue to stop him. Because of the guy in front of him, he had to delay the time of awakening of many dead, and even let some of the awakeners fall into a deep sleep again. The dead were immortal in this world, but consciousness was not immortal. There used to be a lot of awakeners in the land of the dead, but after one war after another, the entire world had less than 1,000th of the awakeners. For example, his current territory was still the entrance of life and death for the living outside. Basically, there would be living people appearing every once in a while. And with the living people stirring up trouble, the existence of the awakeners would naturally be even fewer. As the strongest dead in this mass grave, he was equivalent to the lord of this place. He only wanted more dead under his command to be able to awaken. He did not want a living person like William to interrupt their chances of awakening again and again. Finally, after thinking that he could not take down William, he said in a deep voice, "If you come back here alive, then hide your breath, hide your figure, and return from here to your world. If you disturb the sleep of the dead here again, even if I have to risk going back to sleep again, I will make you stay here forever." Okay, of course, this is not a problem. William nodded cautiously. He did not stay for long and immediately fled. The strongest dead in the mass grave narrowed his eyes and summoned his not-so-smart subordinate, the Space Grand Enchanter. "Go to the southern city and tell the strongest dead there that a living person has come. Stop him. I will kill that living person with him." "Yes." The Space Grand Enchanter nodded in confusion and turned to leave. At this moment, the facial expression of the legendary dead warrior became more and more human-like. He suddenly laughed and said to himself, "The last time I ate the flesh of a living person was when a space-time portal was opened, right? The flesh of a legendary shield warrior is too delicious." How many days has it been? It seems I've only eaten for less than 300 days, and that living person died. His soul is dead, so naturally, the flesh is not delicious. This time, I must capture them. As long as they don't die and have a chance to recover from their injuries, I can slowly eat them. Maybe I can eat them for a very long time. Yes, I must resist the temptation. Don't swallow his soul. The prince could not help but shiver. All the hair on his body stood up. He felt that the death aura in this world was too heavy. No matter where he went, it was full of danger and killing intent. He even doubted why he had come here. But soon, after he left the mass grave, he finally saw green. It was a pity that there were no signs of life in this green sea of forest, even though there were all kinds of magical beasts and animals in the forest. Even these magical beasts and animals were relying on their instincts to hunt and eat. However, he saw that after a dragon ate a certain animal, its stomach had become much bigger. But after an hour, the dragon's stomach became smaller again. The place where the animal had died once again condensed its body. William had also done other experiments. For example, he had cut down a tree and even used flames to burn the tree into ashes. He had even crushed the ashes into dust and placed them in his space ring. But after an hour, the tree had recovered. The ashes in the space ring also disappeared. This world has left the river of time. There is no time in this world. But as long as one does not become a sage or a god, it means that no one can lose time. Perhaps there were gods who wanted to create an immortal world and attempted to make this world without death their own kingdom. But the immortal body does not mean that the soul is immortal. Some people died too many times and could not take it anymore. Their consciousness collapsed, and their soul naturally perished. But in this world where the body is immortal, it seems that as long as there is enough time to sleep, some corpses will also give birth to new wisdom, and thus become the dead with consciousness. This is a new life and even a new race. William could not help but clench his fists. He vaguely remembered a god who had not appeared in the later stages of the game, but whose name had spread throughout the gods' continent. God of the underworld. This is the land of the dead. This place is related to the Styx River. This place has left the river of time. It is definitely not for the pursuit of eternal life, but to use the characteristics of the Styx River to create the dead. It must be the god of the underworld. This is the lair of the god of the underworld. He created a new race, a new world, a world that belongs to the dead. With so many clues connecting, William could only think of the god of the underworld. If there were no accidents, this small world that had left the river of time should be the lair of the god of the underworld. Is the god of the underworld dead? If the god of death is not dead, why would the god of the underworld, who controls the Styx River, be dead? To be able to pull the entire small world out of the river of time with his own strength. How powerful is he? William's body could not help but tremble. He kept cursing Paul Bane in his heart. When he returned home, he would definitely beat him to death. If it was not for Paul Bane, he would not have come here for no reason. Even if there were great treasures, could they be more important than his life? But fortunately, the god of the underworld has not awakened. It is also possible that he does not have time to care about us little fellows 1 year. I'll spend this year peacefully and quickly return home. William secretly had a plan in his heart, but he glanced at his own luck points. Suddenly, he felt like crying. He felt that even if he dug a hole and buried himself, he might provoke some underground creatures. Damn it. Forget it. If I really encounter the god of the underworld, I'll use my backer. I hope that he will give me face. William sighed and aimlessly flew into the distance, trying to find a place with living people. Chapter 577. Ever since the land of the dead had appeared, William had never heard of any sages entering it. Perhaps when this small world was first discovered, there would definitely be sages entering it. But after that, there were no more sages coming here. In William's imagination, the sages might be too strong and might attract the attention of the god of the underworld. That was why the land of the dead only allowed legendary professionals to enter. That's bad. I can't easily summon Odin's clone. Otherwise, there might be a big problem. William stroked his chin. One of his trump cards had been restricted. He might not even be able to use his father's blood essence. He could only unleash the combat power of a legendary professional. While he was running around aimlessly, he suddenly sensed that there was a battle not far away. When William flew over, he could not help but inhale a mouthful of cold air. The person in front of him was a legendary professional from the Runeland. He was wearing a black robe, and his hands were constantly condensing many complicated runes. He threw the runes at the dead that were charging at him. In less than 3 seconds, the dead were controlled by him. The dead were controlled one after another, and like puppets, they were used by him and fought with the other dead. At this moment, the number of dead puppets under him had reached thousands. There were magical beasts and professionals, and there were 3 legendary dead puppets. William frowned. He did not want to provoke this person, so he turned and was about to leave. But the person in the black robe blocked him like a phantom. He said with a strange laugh, "Hey, professional from the legendary continent. Are you thinking of leaving after seeing my secret? You want to kill me? That depends on whether you have the ability to do so." William raised his eyebrows. He used the beans to transform into soldiers. 4 legendary heroic spirits and dozens of epic heroic spirit puppets were thrown out. William thought that this move could scare the person in front of him and make him think that he was not someone to be trifled with. But he did not expect the person to tremble when he saw this scene. He clenched his fists excitedly and shouted, "Puppet skills, a new puppet skills, the puppet skills of the legendary continent. You deserve to die. I'm going to master the strongest puppet skills in the world and become the puppet god." Before William could unsheath his sword, both of them heard the sound of a sword. Buzz! A vast and majestic aura covered the sky and earth. William and the person raised their heads with difficulty and looked above in disbelief. The next second, a dazzling sword light descended from the sky, as if it had come from beyond the universe, from beyond the atmosphere. This several thousand-meter-long sword chi, accompanied by boundless sword intent, slashed down like a waterfall. Rumble. It was unavoidable and unavoidable. The black-robed man in front of the prince did not even have the ability to activate his shield. He could only roar and shriek in despair before turning into dust. Not even a speck of dust was left behind. One strike. This powerful legendary professional, who wanted to exchange a few blows with William, did not even have the chance to retaliate. He turned into ashes and died without a complete corpse. As for the puppets that he had once controlled, they were all freed and fell to the ground. William was also within the range of the sword chi. His skin was pierced by the sword chi, and there were bloody holes everywhere. It looked terrible, but fortunately, they were only superficial wounds. Meanwhile, a young man wielding a black longsword approached William from afar. He covered 1,000 meters with each step and gradually arrived in front of William. He did not even look at the black-robed man, who was about to be resurrected. He raised his eyebrows and said, "A professional from the legendary continent." When the prince saw the man's face, he was shocked. This guy was also a member of the Rune continent, but he was the reincarnation of a god. He was a super powerful god among the gods. Sword god, Saderos. He was a true swordsman who had reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Even if the thunder god, Thor, was very strong, he was like a little brother in front of Saderos. The black long sword in his hand was called Eternal Destruction. It was ranked second on the list of divine weapons with killing power. This sword was far stronger than William's heavenly saber in terms of attack power and various killing effects. In his previous life, this person had also surpassed the realm of sages, just like the Supreme Pontiff of Light. He was extremely powerful. William did not know what relationship he had with the person in front of him. Why did he kill the black-robed man with one strike? William took a deep breath and decided to reply, "Yes, I'm a lord of the City of Dawn from the legendary continent." Saderos raised his eyebrows in surprise. "I've heard of you. You seem to be very powerful and are at odds with the godly slaying temple. Since you have a bad relationship with the godly slaying temple, you're my friend." Ding dong. Prompt. Saderos' affinity for you has increased by 341 points. The prince heaved a sigh of relief. At critical moments, the god of looks was very helpful. This kind of existence depended on one's looks. His father in the god's world still loved him, but he also discovered that basically, professionals who were at odds with the godly slaying temple seemed to be able to obtain the affinity of the reincarnation of God. Was the black-robed man in front of him related to the godly slaying temple? Saderos glanced at the body of the black-robed man, who was still recovering. He chuckled and said, "There's going to be another dead person in this world. I've given the god of the underworld a small gift. Let's go." "You don't seem to be familiar with this place?" William glanced at him and nodded. He decided to go shopping with him because the guy in front of him was frank and straightforward. He would say whatever was on his mind. In addition to the fact that he had a good impression of him, William believed that this guy would not lie to him. Even if he lied to him, he would not be considered a coward. Subsequently, both of them transformed into rainbow lights and disappeared from the world. After a period of time had passed in this place, the body of the black-robed man had finally recovered, but his eyes were blank as he stood in the world. He looked around in a daze. Eventually, because he could not detect any living auras, he flew to the surface and lay down quietly, because time would awaken him, and he would even have the memories of his previous life. "Sadaros, you said that this is the small world of the god of the underworld. Do you know anything about this place?" William and Sadaros flew at full speed. They discovered that this small world was extraordinarily large. It was far larger than the small world that Odin had entered. "Fortunately, I heard it from friend." Sadaros found an excuse and chuckled. "You should know about the Styx, right?" William nodded. The Styx was no longer a secret to legendary professionals. Sadaros smiled and said, "Everyone says that the Styx belongs to the dark world, but the exact location of the Styx is between the dark world and the world of gods. It is responsible for receiving all the souls of the dark world and the world of gods and reincarnating them into new creatures. The god of the underworld is a god born from the Styx. He has the godhood of the Lord God and is very powerful. It's a pity that even though he is the god of the underworld, he cannot completely control the Styx. The Styx is more like the embodiment of the rules of heaven and earth. The god of the underworld is just a pawn of the Styx, unless he can reach a higher realm. This small world is a small world created by the god of the underworld using the Styx. It also has a portion of the rules of the Styx. He originally wanted the small world to become a transit station. When the Styx absorbs souls, the souls will temporarily stay here. This will give the god of the underworld enough time and opportunities to study the souls and even attempt to completely control the Styx. William was slightly taken aback. This was different from what he had expected. "Come to think of it, brother, obviously you haven't heard of this. It's as if you have personally experienced it. Isn't your excuse too casual? Aren't you afraid that people will suspect that you are the reincarnation of a god?" But who was the sword god Sadaros? He did not care about these suspicions. He wished that people would call him the sword god again. So he continued to speak in a pretentious tone. "It's a pity that things don't go according to plan. There's a problem with the belief of the gods, and the god of the underworld is unable to escape this calamity. Therefore, at the last moment, he pulled this small world out of the river of time and formed an eternal land. He created his own underworld. But this way, the various humans, Serafkin, elves, his countless believers, and even the souls that originally existed in this small world are trapped here. As long as the living creatures and souls here are unable to become sages, they will become the dead for eternity. Under the rules of the Styx, they will gradually awaken and become the dead with the ability to awaken." As for what exactly does he want to do? Can you guess? The corners of William's mouth twitched. Who knew what the god of the underworld wanted to do? Even if the sky collapsed, there would be tall people to hold it up. As long as the Pope of Light was alive, William did not believe that the god's world would perish. Sadaros twitched his mouth. "Use your imagination. Actually, I don't know either, but I can feel that this guy is definitely up to no good. But I can tell you one thing. If you kill the Awakeners here, you will obtain the origin power. This is the pure origin power given to the Awakeners by the Styx. Not only can it extend one's lifespan, but it can also increase one's cultivation level. It can even allow one to reach a higher realm. It is equivalent to stealing the origin power of this small world. The most important thing is, in this small world, there are some god temples of the underworld gods faction. There are also some treasures and divine weapons that the underworld god had plundered. If you seize the opportunity, you will be able to reach the top in a single step. But William could not help but ask, what about the underworld god and the gods of his faction? Aren't they here? Saderos raised his eyebrows. Yes, but we are only legendary professionals. It doesn't matter if we take some of the origin power, especially since he probably has no time to find trouble with us. In addition, I have a good friend who is on good terms with him. He won't attack me. Friend from nothing? Or is that friend you? Brother, are you sure you are not the guide NPC of the underworld god Small World? The corners of William's mouth twitched. The guy in front of him was full of nonsense, but it also meant that the underworld god was still in this world. William also understood that the sages could not enter the small world. Perhaps it was because the sages' destructive power was too great, and their ability to extract the origin power of the small world was too exaggerated. Therefore, when the various forces of the god's continent discovered this small world and entered it, the underworld god must have taken action to prevent the sages of the god's continent from entering the small world. As for the legendary professionals, the underworld god probably did not care about them. Perhaps they would become food for the underworld god's awakeners. Perhaps they would not suffer any losses, and they could even make a small profit. Not long after, William suddenly sensed the aura of the thunder god Thor. Meanwhile, the sword god Saderos narrowed his eyes and suddenly attacked. In an instant, the two of them fought, and the heavens and earth shook. It was as if they had a feud with each other. Chapter 578. The sword energy flashed, and the lightning was like a sea. Everything within a radius of tens of thousands of meters, including the trees, flowers and plants, magical beasts and animals, was instantly crushed into powder. The immense pressure was like a mountain falling from the sky. Besides William, everything else had disappeared. The ground had sunk by tens of meters. When they clashed, the countless spatial rifts they created were comparable to the battle prowess of a saint. Fortunately, both of them did not continue fighting. Their attacks seemed to be probing each other. But after a short separation, sword god Saderos' words made William understand why the two of them would fight each other the moment they met. Thunder god with a broken arm, you're still alive. What a pity. Saderos glanced at Thor's left hand. As soon as he heard this, Thunder God almost exploded in anger. Fortunately, he understood that this wasn't the place for a duel, so he just sneered. Humph. I really don't know which idiot's weapon dropped a level of quality after I hammered it down, and he still has the nerve to criticize me? Saderos narrowed his eyes, and the eternal destruction sword in his hand trembled slightly. He seemed to know that the enemy in front of him was mocking him. He wanted to unleash an unimaginable amount of sword energy to kill the enemy. William coughed lightly and said, "We're all on the same side. Let's talk nicely. This is the territory of the Lord of the Underworld. Even if we don't have to be careful, we should at least give him some face." Humph. Both of them did not attack. Instead, they sneered and made some sounds of disdain. They did not care if the Lord of the Underworld would wake up, but they did not dare to fight anymore. Because so many years had passed, who knew if the Lord of the Underworld would give them face? Saderos looked at William again and scanned his left and right hands. He said in a deep voice, "Lad, I've said what I need to say. Just be careful here. In the future, when you go to the Rune continent, if anyone finds trouble with you, just tell them my name." After he finished speaking, Saderos turned his head and transformed into a ray of sword light before vanishing. Thunder God, Thor smirked and looked at William with ill intentions. He gestured for him to shut up, warning him not to talk nonsense outside. Otherwise, even Moses would not be able to protect him. Then, Thor turned and left. Obviously, the encounter between the two of them brought out very bad memories in their hearts. William did not know why they had fought in the first place. Not only had the Thunder God's left hand been cut off, but eternal destruction, which was ranked first in terms of lethality, had also dropped a grade. But the prince could finally breathe a sigh of relief, because when the two of them fought, they gave him a lot of pressure. Although the battle strength of both sides just now was not as strong as when he activated his unparalleled, it was still comparable to when he used the power of the Saint Spirit, which increased all his attributes by 45%. Interesting, but not invincible, Yi Futian said. William knew that the two of them were really angry. Their attacks just now are not that simple. Thinking about it, his current level was not too high. That meant that he was not too far off from them. Moreover, he had his father's blood essence as his trump card. If he really fought with them, it was hard to say who would win. William didn't hesitate. He transformed into a beam of rainbow light and disappeared. He didn't want his enemies to track him down because of the battle here. After an unknown amount of time, William flew aimlessly. He killed 7 or 8 awakeners and gained a lot of experience. Then he saw a huge city built on countless corpses. That was right. From afar, the city was lifeless. There were no signs of life, but there were humanoid creatures walking in the city. It meant that this was a dead city made up of the dead. More importantly, the dead could walk and talk on the streets. This meant that all the dead in this city were awakeners, because the non-awakener kings were usually in a deep sleep when they couldn't touch living people and were not under the command of an awakener. For example, the hundreds of millions of skeletons outside the city were all sleeping, waiting to wake up. How is this a F** king city? It's obviously a giant tomb built on corpses. I don't know why these people want to start a war. Is it because the feeling of not being able to die is too uncomfortable? William looked from the sky and could not help but suck in a cold breath. Because on this battlefield where countless creatures had died, there were too many auras of different races. Colossal creatures that were thousands of meters tall could be seen everywhere. And near this city, there was a blood-red river flowing. Its source and direction were unknown. It was a branch of the Styx River. William did not dare to go close to the Styx River, which was thousands of meters wide. He could feel many strange auras in the Styx River. If he went close, the existence in the Styx River might pull him in. But after discovering the branch of the Styx River in the dead city, he thought that he was almost at the center of this small world. He took a deep breath and used several magic scrolls to shield himself from the auras of the living. Then, he took the risk and flew to the city gate. If he wanted to understand this place, he would have to stay for a long time. It was more convenient to go through the local natives. Soon, William came to the city gate, which was guarded by several dead grandmasters. He did not show any identification, nor did he intend to speak. He just exuded the faint aura of a legendary and walked in curiously. "Hold on," a grandmaster-level undead guard said respectfully. When William saw the guard's expression, his heart that had just been lifted returned to his stomach. He turned his head and asked in confusion, "What's the matter? Are you a legendary awakener who did not report?" "Report what? Report? What report?" The Grandmaster Guard's mouth twitched. He took a step back, and a professional with a slightly stronger aura came forward and said, "My lord, we have no intention of stopping you. We just want to bring you to the Identity Hall to report your identity. Perhaps you have awakened the memories of your previous life, but you should know that you are no longer a living person." William's eyes flashed with confusion, fear, and helplessness. His expression became more and more furious, as if he wanted to refute what the two of them had said. After a long time, he only expressionlessly said in a deep voice, "Let's go. Bring me there." The Grandmaster Guard smiled and pointed in the direction for William to go first. He followed behind and said, "Where did my lord awaken?" William frowned. He was a little confused. It was hard to say. The guard hurriedly smiled and said, "It's okay if you don't know. Just point to the place where you came from. My lord seems to have awakened for a period of time." "Time? What's the point of talking about time here? I only know that I lived in a muddled state and woke up in a muddled state. Why don't you tell me what time is?" William's expression did not change, but he caught the guard's trap. The young guard's eyes flashed, but he seemed to be relieved. He continued to say, "My lord is right. I woke up on this ancient battlefield. Of course, time has no meaning to us. Otherwise, more and more people who want to die will not start wars. But without death, how can there be new life?" When the word new life was mentioned, many awakeners on the street showed a fanatical state. William took in the scene on the street. He did not say much. He just followed the guard to settle his identity certificate and obtained a portion of food. Or rather, it was a piece of flesh from a living person. It looked fresh and juicy. It should be the belly meat of a fat lad. If it was roasted, the little dead next door would be so hungry that they would cry. In fact, there was no need to roast it. The moment this piece of flesh was taken out, the staff of the Identity Hall, and even some advanced Grandmaster and Epic Awakeners all looked at this piece of flesh with crazy eyes. William did not dare to hesitate. He also showed a hungry expression, but he forcibly shifted his gaze and kept it in his space ring. Only then did he heave a deep sigh of relief. But he also showed a disgusted expression. After the other Awakeners did not see this piece of flesh, they showed a look of despair, but they did not dare to say anything. It was obvious. As a legendary Awakener, William seemed to have certain privileges. When he first woke up, he could obtain a piece of delicious food. If he wanted to obtain the flesh of living creatures again, he would need to use other methods. The staff who had just given him the flesh swallowed his saliva and said, "My lord, you must have just woken up. The flesh of living creatures is very valuable. You may have the memory of your previous life and do not want to eat it now, but it is our instinct to devour the flesh of living creatures. Even the dark creatures of the dark world do not have such a strong instinct like us. Even if you do not want to eat it, there is no need to throw it away. You can use it to exchange for many good things. You don't have to care about my matters." William showed an impatient look and turned to leave. The staff looked helpless. He wanted to say something nice to let the legendary big shot in front of him know the value of this piece of flesh. Then he would take advantage of the fact that William did not want to eat it now. But the guy named Caesar was obviously a little arrogant. After knowing the value of this piece of flesh, he turned to leave. But they did not dare to make too much noise because the Awakener in front of them was a legendary expert. In terms of life level, it was enough to suppress them to the point that they could not breathe. But how did the Awakeners become stronger? They would be at the same level as they were before they died. They would devour the flesh of living creatures. They would devour the origin power of other Awakeners. Finally, they would fall into a deep sleep. It was equivalent to the training of professionals, but it was too slow. In the following days, William wandered around the city. After rejecting the invitations of some forces, he continued to explore the mysteries of this world. 3 days passed. William found out a lot of things. The living creatures in this small world of the underworld were once believers of the underworld. There were billions of them, including elves, seraphin, dragons, humans, and so on. But after the small world left the river of time, the living creatures here seemed to have obtained eternal life. But the disappearance of time would bring unimaginable torment to the ordinary living creatures. Memories, sleep, diseases, pain, and countless things related to time would be superimposed on them at this moment. Their souls were completely unable to adapt to the stagnation of time. So after countless people went crazy, some legendary experts could not bear it and took the initiative to launch destructive wars again and again. According to William's calculations, the farthest war from now was in the middle of the Second Era. In fact, there were many dragons, elves, and seraphin. According to logic, as long as these long-lived creatures had a high enough level, they could live for a very long time. Many legendary professionals were the same. But it should not be forgotten that the time here was chaotic. It was eternal. They could not feel the passage of time, but they would also go crazy during the long years. So actually, to many living creatures, time was indispensable. Only by dying, being reborn, and becoming an Awakener could they truly adapt to this new world that had no concept of time. However, it was not as if there were no living creatures in this world. There was an underground farm in the center of this city, where living creatures, animals, and magical beasts lived. It was difficult for them to die, even if they wanted to, and they were the rations of the top Awakeners here. William had even heard that in that farm, there were many legendary creatures that could live for many years. They were strong, had perseverance, and could continuously recover from their injuries by absorbing magic. No matter how much flesh was cut from their bodies, as long as it was not fatal, their desire to live would be triggered. They would continuously absorb magic to recover from their injuries. But it was precisely these legendary professionals that had lived long enough that they provided endless rations to the top awakeners, thereby satisfying their cravings. Even if some legendary professionals had been driven crazy, but the king's land no longer needed dead people. Even if they were crazy, no one would kill them. After all, there were fewer and fewer living creatures, and there was less and less food. When William found out about these things, he could not help but want to vomit. He had never expected that the deepest part of this world of the dead hid such an incredible secret. He even suspected that the god of the underworld did not want to attack the legendary professionals that had entered. He must have made some kind of deal with the sages outside. For example, the legendary experts from the outside could come here to search for opportunities. But if they were not careful and fell here, they could not think of leaving alive. William gradually became suspicious. He started to think, why did the god of the underworld intend to create this group of dead? This group of dead was strong, but there was not much hope of them becoming sages. They were not worthy of being called the subordinates of the god of the underworld. Then what was his purpose in doing all this? Faith? No, the god of the underworld should still be clearing the faith. Even if it was for faith, he could wait for himself to recover his strength, and then go to the god's continent to find more believers. Using this group of dead to conquer the god's continent, and thus causing the deaths of the major continents? William slightly frowned. If the more people who died, the more benefits the god of the underworld would receive. This logic seemed reasonable, but it was still a little far-fetched. Oh, god of the underworld, dead sticks? Of the same origin. It is said that the power of the dead can make people stronger. What about the god of the underworld? Especially the awakened ones in this city. Moreover, there are more and more awakened ones now. The god of the underworld has awakened and devoured countless awakened ones to become stronger. What is it? William took a deep breath and turned to look in the direction of the sticks. He knew that there was a temple nearby. It was the temple of the bloody god. Perhaps he could understand more things there or obtain more treasures. But at this moment, William vaguely sensed the gazes of many people. It was a group of dead people. They were looking at him. It was like looking at a piece of food. Chapter 579. William did not know why his identity had been exposed. He had been here for a long time. Even if he rejected the invitation of some forces, it should not attract too much attention. William was a legendary professional who had just awakened. It was normal for him to hesitate. However, William sensed a familiar aura. It was the legendary warrior with the indestructible body endowment that he had encountered when he had just arrived. William understood that the guy in front of him was not just a warrior. He also had some locking and tracking magic skills. TSK. He seemed to be a dual practitioner of magic and martial arts, just like William. But damn, he still cursed him for eating meat. At this time, as more and more legendary professionals approached, the other awakeners in the city also retreated. It seemed that the top experts in the city did not want these low-level awakeners to die in vain. 1 minute later, 32 legendary professionals appeared around William. Among them, there were 6 awakeners who had the aura of the peak legendary, including the legendary warrior that William had encountered first. William's expression was a little gloomy. These guys did not seem to have the glory of being strong. They only knew how to gang up on him. We've seen people like you who dare to step into the city of the dead more than once. Surrender yourself. You should know what you're going to face. As long as you're honest, you'll be able to endure less torture. Otherwise, if you attack us and get caught, not only will we eat your flesh and drink your blood, but we will also torture you day and night. A lightning-type awakener sneered. Haha, why are you wasting your breath on him? I've never seen a living person surrender before. Each of them thinks that they are very strong and have extraordinary combat power. They seem to think that it is an honor for them to be able to come here. In the end, they're just a bunch of trash. I did not expect the living people to become more and more trash after so long. This city of the dead did not have a so-called city lord. It should be a city that was jointly owned by these legendary professionals. While they were talking and getting closer to William, William's expression changed. William suddenly unsheathed the heaven-suppressing blade. Many legendary awakeners raised their eyebrows. The killing power of this divine weapon was extraordinary, but they had more people. They were not afraid. Even if they killed one of them, there would be thousands of them standing up. But William did not attack them. He took out a black magic tool with his left hand. Instantly, the 32 legendary professions felt a chill and looked at him nervously. They didn't know what this guy was going to do. Then His Royal Highness grinned and chuckled. "My lord, I've eaten poop." Everyone only saw his small hand pressing down. Rumble. In this city of nearly 1,000,000 awakeners, there were hundreds of places where dazzling mushroom clouds erupted at the same time. Huge shockwaves swept through the buildings and awakeners in the city, turning everything in their path into ashes. Between the legendary experts and William, there were also intense flames that rose. If the explosions in other places were small missiles, the thing that William had thrown between them was definitely comparable to the power of a nuclear bomb. Mo had no choice. It was a super bomb made of 10,000 mana crystals. So, after the dazzling and fatal shock wave spread out, half of the legendary awakeners were instantly turned into ashes. Their magic shields, combat aura shields, and other defensive means were torn apart layer by layer, like snowballs thrown into a pot of boiling oil, and their bodies disappeared in an instant. 5 seconds had passed. This city built on pure white bones was still blasted to the ground. From afar, the city of the dead was like a boulder sitting in the crater of a volcano. The sky and earth were turned upside down, and it gave people the feeling that it was thrown into the air. The remaining legendary awakeners were dumbfounded. They were riddled with wounds and covered in blood. They stared blankly at the scene in front of them in disbelief. A large city with millions of awakeners was gone just like that. It was destroyed by a single person. Except for the 18 legendary experts and some epic awakeners who had survived, the rest were all dead. Not even a hair was left, although their physical bodies would recover. But the souls of the awakeners would dissipate. After their physical bodies reformed, they would become the dead who had fallen into a deep sleep. Even if they could wake up the next time, they would be another person. The earth-shattering explosion had alarmed countless existences. The hundreds of millions of dead who surrounded the ruins of the city slowly stood up and looked at everything in front of them in confusion. In fact, there were many awakeners outside the city. They were also confused. It was not a skill or a forbidden spell. What exactly was that destructive shockwave? Oh, apologies. The method of explosion of magical crystals was first researched by the dwarves in the Second Era. In the past, magical crystals were like magical stones. They were minerals that the gods used to devour magic. The creatures in the mythological era had never experienced such things. As for William, sorry, he had already taken advantage of the shock wave and disappeared from the city of the dead. He did not stop as he flew to the temple that he had booked. Especially in this era, this group of people still wanted to fight him one-on-one and gang up on him. Times had changed. Zhou Shuren had said that technology was the first productivity and the magic cannon was the most powerful. It was already the 4th era. How could the gods' continent not have developed? Back then, the legendary professionals that this group of people had encountered were poor. Moreover, as the Lord of the City of Dawn, he had a group of mages who researched advanced technology for him every day. Moses was the chief scientist, and he had come up with hundreds of explosive combinations of magical crystals. He had even developed a magical Gatling gun. He had too few manpower. Otherwise, he would have taught this group of people what it meant by success is the truth. Ever since William knew that killing the Awakeners would give him a large amount of origin power, a large amount of experience, he had been thinking about how to make a big move. Until he discovered the City of the Dead, a place with millions of Awakeners. Instantly, William was enlightened. Magical crystals. I can't bring them with me when I'm alive, and I can't bring them with me when I'm dead. It's a great deal to use such expensive items to exchange for experience. Therefore, William stayed in the City of the Dead for a few days. He madly dug tunnels and installed sets of explosive crystals. He wanted to make a big move before he left. But he was discovered. William was not afraid. He threw a super nuclear warhead that was made up of 10,000 magical crystals. Was he afraid of death? Of course he was. But he was strong. As long as he was not killed instantly, he would not die from the shockwave. He could even step on the nuclear warhead and fly away. But the enemies could not withstand it at all. Besides some tankier warriors, shield bearers, and grandmasters of combat, the rangers, mages, and assassins were all blasted into ashes. I've gained so much experience. It's enough for me to reach level 210. William had already escaped to the vicinity of the temple. He dug a tunnel and hid again. He estimated his harvest. I've gained more than 3 billion experience points. It's more than what I've gained from harvesting leeks and completing missions. I've just reached the legendary level, and I've already reached level 210. William laughed. The legendary level was 180, and the sage level was 270. He had advanced by 1/3 of the 90 levels. It was equivalent to the beginner legendary level. Killing these dead doesn't give me anything other than experience points. There aren't even any tools or skills. But to me, this place is like a super VIP training area. It's like playing a private game. The prince finally understood why so many people would tirelessly come here, even if the land of the undead was extremely dangerous. It was because fighting here for a year was definitely equivalent to cultivating in the outside world for decades, or even hundreds of years. In addition, according to the degree of danger, it was far inferior to the impassable continent. As long as one killed enough awakeners, they would continue to become stronger, and they would have a chance to escape after a year. This temptation was not small for many legendary professions, but I seem to have it easier than them. William raised his eyebrows. He had the attribute panel. After killing the awakeners, the origin power would automatically be converted into experience points. But when other legendary professionals killed the awakeners, they would have to plunder and absorb a wave of origin power. It was obviously more complicated. This was also the reason why they could not attack some cities of the dead. After all, if they could not kill all the dead, they would not have the opportunity to collect all the origin power to strengthen themselves. While William was thinking, he had already dug near the temple. The familiar magical metal appeared in front of him, and he could not help but pick up a few pieces with his fingers. William frowned. He could not sense any danger in the temple, and there was no aura of the living. But he had recently obtained a lot of information, and he knew that the Awakeners knew that there was a temple here. But the Awakeners thought that this temple was a restricted area. They would never come here, and the existences in the temple would not come out either. Although the distance between the two was very close, they did not interfere with each other. They minded their own business. It was just like how the temple seemed to be shielded from the Awakeners. They subconsciously ignored the temple. As long as no one mentioned the temple, they would not think of its existence. But William had an idea in his mind. The living creatures and the dead treated each other as experience points. They could gain more power by killing the dead. Perhaps the gods in the temple were the same. Because according to logic, even if there were foreign legendary professionals who often came here, the number of Awakeners should not be so small. Was there a possibility? Some of the gods in the small world of the underworld, who were recovering and deprived of faith, also treated the Awakeners as sheep. Every once in a while, the number of Awakeners would increase, and the gods would collect a wave of origin power. And after the dead died, they could continue to awaken. Hiss, I seem to have figured out the truth. The small world of the underworld broke away from the river of time, and its purpose was to create a batch of sheep that could never be harvested. Using this group of people to restore its strength? Yes, that should be the case. He had just overturned the city of the dead, but the existence of the temple did not come out. It meant that there was a big problem with the person in front of him. At least, the person in front of him did not have the mood or the ability to stop William from destroying. But since he was already here, there was no reason for him not to enter the temple. William used his small hands to slowly dig upwards from the bottom of the Temple of Light with the intention of stealing while he was passing by. He really wanted to see what kind of god was in this temple, or how the gods extracted faith. Chapter 580. William's method and speed of entering the temple were very familiar. In less than half a minute, he had reached the main hall of the temple. If someone saw him, they would think that he had returned home. Unfortunately, he was really discovered by someone, and they were very curious about the familiarity he felt, as if he had returned home. It was because there was a living god in this temple, one of the 4 gods under the god of the underworld, Death Goddess. There was a reincarnated death god in the Sunset Empire. Both of them were death gods, but there was a huge difference in their divinity. In addition, the death goddess had the endowment of death. She was the natural enemy of the death god. This was one of the reasons why she sought refuge with the god of the underworld. At this moment, William was sneakily looking around. He glanced at the statue of the god in the main hall. He gradually raised his head and looked past the legs and waist. When he saw the 2 peaks on the chest, he could not help but gasp. Isn't this statue too big? Fortunately, William quickly shook his head. There was no need for him to fantasize about a god statue. Since there seemed to be no one in the temple, if he could find the inheritance crystal of the death goddess, the artifact, or some tributes, it would be a worthwhile trip. He looked around, but did not find anything valuable in the main hall. He was about to push open the door of the side hall. A long-legged woman wearing a black spaghetti-strap dress suddenly appeared behind William and blew at the back of his head. Who? William's expression changed. Was there a ghost here? No. There were no living people in this world. The person behind the statue was not a dead person. It could only be a god. He had been careless. Or rather, he had never thought that it would be so easy to enter a shrine with a god. He was prepared to run away if he was discovered digging the shrine, but he did not encounter any defensive measures at all. Instead, he let down his guard. The prince swallowed his saliva and turned around. When he saw the person behind him, his expression froze. Am I beautiful? The voice was very light, but it had a seductive feeling. Beautiful. William silently gave a thumbs up, indicating that he did not see the half of the skeleton face. To be honest, if the woman in front of him was not half a skeleton, she would be very beautiful. But, sorry, she was too big, so the prince didn't look at her face. In this way, the prince's eyes shone with sincerity and beauty, which meant that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. The goddess of death was slightly stunned. She took a deep look at the half-elf in front of her. She dared to swear to the lamp that she had never seen such a handsome man with such a beautiful voice since the birth of the mythological era. 3 words. This man is too good-looking. I want him, conquer him, possess him. Especially since she had a certain level of discernment, she could tell that William's words were sincere. However, the goddess of death was still controlling her twisted heart to prevent herself from having a good impression of him. She continued to step forward and said, "You clearly saw half of my face. Why do you still say that I'm beautiful?" William blinked at her, and his gaze involuntarily fell somewhere else. He said, "A beautiful soul is the real beauty. Whether it's a human being, a god, or an undead, you can't pay too much attention to your appearance. Otherwise, isn't it too superficial?" The goddess of death covered her mouth and chuckled. She couldn't help but say, "You little guy, your words are quite interesting. Those guys who came before were so boring. They were either scared silly or crazy and wanted to escape from here. Do you know what's happening to them now?" William was about to turn around and escape, but he was interrupted by this sentence. He understood that those companions who had mistakenly entered were almost all dead. However, he thought that he had the most handsome face in the world. So he put on a pitiful and cute expression and said, "You might not believe it, but I'm really lost. I was just walking and walking, and I found my way here." "Yes, I believe it. Your hands are very beautiful, and you look very handsome when you dig a hole. So I want you to stay and accompany me forever." The goddess of death's voice became colder and colder. She became more and more strange and perverted. Even half of her smile began to distort. The goddess of death did not have any good impression of William. William frowned. Logically speaking, it should not be like this. Under the situation where there was no hatred, even gods and sages would have a good impression of him, especially when it was against a woman. He had never lost to anyone with this face. But when he glanced at half of the goddess of death body and the slightly glowing godhood, he seemed to understand that she had basically been brainwashed by the belief to the point of insanity. It seemed that in the process of stripping away the belief, half of her body had become a skeleton. This was unbearable for many women, even goddesses. In particular, she had not recovered after so many years. In addition to the problem of this small world, the goddess of death's mental state was definitely problematic. But there was one point. The high and mighty queens liked to be abused. The high and mighty men also liked to be suppressed. Because these two types of people liked to experience different feelings and to experience excitement that they had never experienced before. So William sneered. Like an arrogant emperor, he walked in front of the goddess of death and pushed her back step by step. Only then did he stretch out his hand and lean on the wall. He slowly looked down into her eyes and said, "Accompany you? Why aren't you the one accompanying me? Just because you're the goddess of death. Do you think that you're very fierce?" The goddess of death's expression was no longer that distorted. She was even stunned. She had never seen such a strong man. Even if the lord of the underworld was the main god, he would never speak arrogantly to her, who was also a god. More importantly, the lord of the underworld was a loner. He never had the intention to mate. His goal and wish was to reach a higher realm. After the man in front of her pressed her against the wall, she felt her heart start to beat wildly. She was even a little nervous and could not say a word. She even had a different feeling when she saw the faintly discernible peak sage aura between William's eyebrows. At least, he could explode with very strong combat power, and he was not weaker than her. He was far superior to the professionals who had previously entered this temple. When William saw this, he understood. He continued to speak in the manner of a proud dragon. "Woman, do you want to take me down? At least you have to be worthy of me." Subsequently, he stretched out his hand and slowly lifted the goddess of death's chin. He smiled and said softly, "At least you have to recover from your injuries first. Do you understand?" Next, he reached out and caressed the half of the goddess of death's skull. He seemed to be fascinated as he said, "After you recover from your injuries, you will definitely look more beautiful than you do now. What do you think?" The goddess of death nodded adorably. The man in front of her was too handsome. Everything he said was the truth. William's hand continued to move downwards to her collarbone and slowly to her ribs. For some reason, the goddess of death had a shy expression, but William saw her constantly changing expression. It was not only shyness. Murderous, crazy, perverted, and enchanted expressions appeared one after another. It looked like the changing of faces in a Beijing opera, but her changing speed was faster. But since it was a performance, she had to carry it through to the end. William pretended not to care. He slowly pressed his face against her face and whispered in her ear, "Since I'm so handsome, why don't you have a good impression of me?" Instantly, the goddess of death's eyes turned black, and her face completely froze. But at the same time, the invincible lord's left hand smashed into her ribs. He grabbed the godhood that was about to break and pulled it down. An ear-piercing scream pierced through the entire temple. Countless black gas ballooned from the surface of the goddess of death's body and turned into countless arms that grabbed at William. She tried to tear off every piece of his flesh and snatch back her godhood. The goddess of death did not expect that this man's left hand could be so hard. Not only could he scratch her divine body, but he could also forcibly pull out the godhood. He did not even care about the death element released by the godhood. She panicked. She was really panicking. She had planned to play with the man in front of her and then eat him bit by bit. She would devour his origin power and further recover from her injuries. But she seemed to have been charmed. Charm, when the goddess of death thought of this word, she was shocked. She had always been the one to charm others and make them sacrifice their lives to her. She had never been charmed by anyone, let alone a legendary professional. What kind of ability was this? She had never seen or heard of such an ability before. William did not dare to resist the black hand that was formed by the death element. Any professional who had the death endowment could take the lives of others. As long as one came into contact with the death element, his lifespan would be taken away. This was an extremely abnormal attribute endowment. But in an instant, Unparalleled holy thunder. The thunder elemental armor covered William's entire body. Before he entered the temple, he had asked Moses to forge this set of equipment for him. Even though the quality was not comparable to the godly equipment, it was not too bad. At least, it would provide him with many attributes and a certain degree of defense. William's attributes had all skyrocketed, and he activated the Thunder Shield. Within a radius of 3 meters, a substantial thunder dragon surrounded him. He was like a real thunder god. In the next moment, 2 dazzling electric lights shot out from his eyes and tore apart the black gas. Thousands of arms were torn apart. His left hand tightly grasped the restless godhood, and his right hand swung the heaven-suppressing blade. Swish! The thunder blade swept away thousands of enemies. The huge hall was split into 2, and the 1,000-meter-tall statue fell to the ground with a deafening rumble. The death goddess was also repelled by the thunderblade, and a hole was formed in the wall. But in the next moment, the death goddess, whose long black dress fluttered in the wind, attacked again. She waved her hand with a ferocious look. A black palm materialized in an instant and slapped William into the side palace. It grabbed William's body tightly and smashed him into the ground again and again. The rumbling sounds continued to ring out. From the outside, the entire temple was cracking, as if it was about to explode. But the death goddess seemed to be getting more and more ferocious. The nails of her huge black hand had pierced into William's body and was about to crush his internal organs. But she still could not snatch away the godhood that William was holding tightly. Crack! Bang! The death goddess knelt on the ground with a pained expression. Her body trembled as if she was about to die. The huge black hand disappeared into thin air, and William, who had lost 60% of his health points, fell to the ground. The prince used his right hand to turn his head back to its original position. He did not care that his body was full of holes, because even if his body was crushed, his bones still did not change. The hardness of the bones of the Lord gods was far from what the goddess of death could crush. He tightly grasped the cracked godhood and walked condescendingly towards the death goddess, who was kneeling in front of him. This time, he used the heaven-suppressing blade to lift her chin and said in a deep voice, "Do you want to die? Do you want to live?" The death goddess had a ferocious look, but her killing intent did not fade. She didn't expect to be defeated by the guy in front of her. However, that was the truth. Without her divine spark, she could only exert the combat power of the peak legendary level when her divine spark was about to be crushed. The godhood was everything to a god. Without the godhood, even if the godhood was not crushed, she could not use the power of the godhood. She could not be considered a god at all. Ha! The heaven-suppressing blade slashed horizontally, and the seemingly weak death goddess covered her face and fell to the ground. William kept the heaven-suppressing blade and held her neck. He asked fiercely again, "Do you want to die? Do you want to live? I'm asking you a question." "Goddess." The voice poured into her eardrums. An indescribably handsome face appeared in front of her again after an unknown period of time. The death goddess was stunned. Ding dong. Prompt. The death goddess has developed 300 affinity points towards you. I want to live. Master. The death goddess, who was wearing a long black dress, knelt on the ground with an aggrieved expression. One of her eyes even flowed with tears. William was stunned. He did not know what to do. This matter. What was going on? He only wanted to control her life and death so that he could use her. There was no need for the death goddess to develop a good impression of him. But it seemed that the death goddess really had Stockholm Syndrome. Oh, was it the feeling of being conquered? I understand. She didn't develop a favorable impression of me, just now not because I'm not handsome enough, but because she still thinks that I can't beat her. But as long as I defeat this little girl, she will submit to me, right? William looked at the goddess of death thoughtfully. She had even secretly glanced at him. It was obvious. Her eyes were full of little stars. That expression of love was definitely not fake, because His Royal Highness had seen this kind of gaze more than any other man. I seem to understand something. William silently looked at his god of beauty endowment. Was there a need to say more? He looked at the 2 words given by the game mainframe. Beauty? God, When an endowment had the word God in its name, he knew that it was not that simple. But what should I do with the death goddess in front of me? William glanced at the little slave girl in front of him. Chapter 581. William was not very interested in the goddess of death. He did not show mercy because she was big. So what if she was big? She was just a pile of flesh. After death, she would turn into a skeleton. William was not the kind of person who cared about women. Cultivating to become an immortal, ascending Ba, his goal was to gain experience points and profit from her. The main reason was that he would be staying here for a long time. If he wanted to live a safe and stable life, the best way was to control a native. After thinking about it, it seemed that no native was better than the original god of death. William did not stand on ceremony. He let the temporarily submissive goddess of death sacrifice her soul and branded it with his brand. Only by controlling her life and death would William dare to return the divinity to her. In fact, he had originally thought of snatching the godhood and handing it over to Odin. However, his doppelganger had already cultivated the light and lightning attributes. If he added the death attribute to it, it would be a triple cultivation. The amount of divinity required was too much. It was far more valuable than secretly controlling a goddess of death. 1 hour later, His Royal Highness cast over 100 soul control spells and finally got it done. Under this kind of torturous soul control, the goddess of death's affinity for him increased by 80 points. She even had a morbid infatuation on her face. TSK, there was no doubt that she was a masochist. Then William interrogated the goddess of death and made her tell him all the information about this small world. 3 hours later, William finally understood the structure of this small world and the plan of the Lord of the Underworld. In fact, many things were similar to what he had imagined. The dead in this small world were once the believers of the Lord of the Underworld and the goddess of death. But ever since the small world was dragged out of the river of time, they could not bear the torture of time disorder and stagnation. They constantly waged war. After all of them died, they were resurrected because the small world had a branch of the Styx River. And from then on, this group of dead seemed to have formed a new race, but they also became the food of the Lord of the Underworld, the goddess of death, the god of massacre, the god of brutality, and the god of despair. Let's put it this way. The function of the Styx River was to absorb souls and cleanse them before putting them back into new lives. But sometimes a handsome person like William would not only whip the corpse, but he would also destroy the soul. Where would the new soul come from? Naturally, the Netherworld River used its own origin power to help it nurture a new soul. The god of the Underworld wanted to extract the power of origin from the Netherworld River. In the end, he did not have the ability to do so. Even if he used his powerful ability to draw out a part of the Netherworld River, he could not devour the origin power within it. However, the god of the Underworld was born in the Netherworld River, and their origins were almost the same. Before the Faith disaster came, he finally found a way, and that was to extract this small world from the river of time, so that even if the billions of living beings in the small world died, their physical bodies would be restored. The branch of the Nether River would also be trapped within. Furthermore, the branch of the Netherworld River had to follow the original rules and continuously extract the origin energy to revive it. That was all. The dead kept dying and coming back to life. Every once in a while, the god of the Underworld, the goddess of death, and the other 3 gods would slaughter a group of people on a large scale and extract their souls. Not only did they provide themselves with divine power, but they could also help them recover from their injuries. Therefore, this was the key reason why none of the 5 gods in this small world had fallen even though they were tortured by their faith. From the mythological era until now, the Netherworld River, which used to be tens of thousands of meters wide, was now less than a few thousand meters wide. One could imagine how much origin power the god of the Underworld and the others had extracted. Perhaps when the Netherworld River completely disappeared, the god of the Underworld and the others would completely return. For example, why were there hundreds of millions of corpses in the city of the dead near this temple? Besides the reason why they had initiated the war, it was also because every time they revived on a large scale, the goddess of death would gather these former believers together and harvest them on a large scale so that they would die again. It's really perverted. The former believers provided you with faith, but even if they died and resurrected, you will kill them again and again. The corners of William's mouth twitched, and he felt a chill in his heart. Of course, in this situation, he was not interested in acting as a messenger of justice, because he did not know if he would become like this if he were to encounter such a situation. Therefore, he cannot be a double dog. Moreover, death. Do you know where there are more awakeners? I'll go and harvest some socialist wool too, William asked shamelessly. Obviously, those people would die sooner or later. Rather than dying in the hands of the gods, it was better to be killed by him. The goddess of death blinked her eyes adorably. She smiled and said, "Master, you can call me Alina. That's my name." "Got it." William waved his hand impatiently, asking her to speak quickly. He had seen many movies in his previous life. For these people who had been queens for countless years, the more impolite they were, the more they liked them. This group of people liked the feeling of being conquered. Alina was not angry. She quickly said in a low voice, "Now, the god of the underworld and the other gods are in seclusion to clean up the more stubborn and integrated belief personalities. As long as you don't break into the temple, you won't attract their attention. But you can't kill too many. At least half of the awakeners in each city of the dead must be left. Otherwise, they will feel that too much of their origin power has been taken away, and they will also kill their way out of the temple." "Just now, you were also cleaning up the more stubborn beliefs?" William raised his eyebrows. No wonder those beliefs were so difficult to deal with. They could even be integrated. This seemed to be the reason why the goddess of death had displayed multiple personalities. Yes, those endless beliefs can be integrated into many negative personalities. They can even affect me to a certain extent. The goddess of death nodded with a complicated expression. When she thought of those things, her expression changed again. Fortunately, his main personality had the upper hand, and he soon suppressed those negative personalities. William raised his eyebrows and did not say much. He just asked her to use a crystal ball to create a three-dimensional map. He pointed out where the city of the dead was, where there were some treasures and places like the secret realm. As the prince kept the crystal ball in the space ring, he looked at the goddess of death, who was already under his control. "Continue to eliminate your previous beliefs. Don't tell others about what happened between us. Just continue to be the goddess of death. I'll leave first." "Master, aren't you going to take me with you? You haven't recovered from your injuries. You're too ugly now. You're not worthy of me." "Oh, ding-dong." Prompt. The goddess of death's affinity with you has increased by 50 points. The overbearing CEO, William, left the Temple of Death without looking back. On the way out, he was not so happy. In his previous life, he had only heard rumors about the goddess of death several times. Then, he could not hear any more news about her. As for the god of massacre, the god of brutality, and the god of despair, they only appeared for a short while before disappearing without a trace. William could not help but murmur, "If I'm not wrong, after this group of people recovered their strength, they seemed to trust the god of death even more because of the origin power. In the end, they were also devoured by the god of death. Otherwise, why would the god of death be so generous and allow them to devour the origin power of the Styx River? The god of death must have planned for this. But these are all things that will only happen in the future. Since the goddess of death has become my little maid, there's no hurry to save her." His Royal Highness no longer hesitated. He glanced at the map in the crystal ball and immediately flew to a city in the god of massacre's territory. There were also a large number of awakeners there, but he didn't know if it had been discovered. At the same time, two people from the god's continent had appeared near the city that William had set his sights on. Purple Armor 1 from the Shrine of Massacre, a taboo master. Purple Armor 2 from the Shrine of Massacre, the time assassin, Acker. The two of them did not trust each other too much, but they were both from the Godslayer Temple. While they were discussing how to deal with the Awakeners in the city, they discovered that His Royal Highness was also sneaking around. He seemed to have the same plan as them. When he saw this scene, the eyes of the taboo master lit up. Acker raised his eyebrows and asked in confusion, "Do you know him, or is he an enemy?" "My enemy, one of the beings that the Shrine of Massacre wants to rope in. Kill him." Acker made a gesture of cutting his throat in disdain. "Okay." The taboo master nodded. He was very afraid of William's methods in the past. He felt that William had embarrassed him. Although the sacred armor of the Shrine of Massacre did not comment on William or punish him, he always felt that the Lord of the City of Dawn was a threat. If William really joined the Shrine of Massacre, his position as a Purple Armor One would not be stable. Acker suddenly laughed and said, "Don't think that I don't know who he is. He's the Lord of the City of Dawn in the legendary continent. He has a father who is at the peak of the sage level. Rumor has it that he has a sword that is extremely powerful among the divine weapons. If we want to kill him, that sword will be mine. Let's do it our way." The taboo master narrowed his eyes. Acker did not hesitate. He immediately said in a deep voice, "Okay, you attack first. I'll be in charge of killing him." Therefore, in the next moment, William was thinking about whether he should attack again. He felt that there was danger everywhere. Suddenly, hundreds of chains appeared around his body and wrapped around him. William's expression changed. "Taboo Master." Yes, a purple-armored taboo master appeared out of thin air. He coldly laughed. "I'll let you die today. Attack." At that moment, time halt. A legendary time assassin was behind him. His sword was stabbed into the assassin's back, causing blood to spurt out. Critical hit, fatal hit, backstab, and true damage. William's health points instantly dropped to 55%. The attack power of a legendary time assassin could definitely kill someone instantly. But William was just a ranger. His health points were not considered high among the legendary warriors. So was 55% of his health points a lot? In particular, his equipment had been sealed and could not be of any use. Hence, after using the sure kill slash, Ike was a little dumbfounded. What kind of abnormal defense was this? He did not have any equipment, and he did not have the time to activate his shield, yet he had only lost 55% of his HP. His life force was still as majestic as before. Gosh, did he choose the wrong profession? Chapter 582. His health dropped by 30% again. Meanwhile, he punched out. William stared at him. The sage aura between his eyebrows did not dissipate for a long time. Bang! Backstab. William frowned. He looked at his increasing health points. He had a bad feeling. The combined power of the Taboo Master and the Time Assassin was much stronger and more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. Ahem. Because of their social circle, if he said too much, it would affect the interests of his friends. So, it was not convenient to say more. But at this moment, now, the maze had become three-dimensional. William glanced at the skull fragments and white brain matter at his feet. He casually threw away the Time Assassin, who had lost half of his head, and stepped on his corpse. He looked around indifferently and sneered. "I just want to see how many trump cards you have. They look ordinary." Oh, at this moment, and in this short period of 10 minutes, what was William least afraid of? D*M in it. Isaac, that be ** is not doing his job. Is he trying to kill me with a borrowed knife? William looked angry and anxious. His fists were like a pile driver, constantly smashing the walls. He was trying to kill his way out. A figure that looked like black liquid suddenly appeared behind William. When William's brain resisted the blow, a lot of words flashed through his mind, but he immediately made a judgment. However, the Time Assassin used his time ability again, causing William to have an illusion. William grabbed the Time Assassin and swung him high up, smashing him through a wall. But the most shocking thing was, the city of the dead in front of him had also disappeared without a trace. This was especially true in ordinary towns and cities. Even if the NPCs wanted to learn, there was no place for them to do so. Meanwhile, he felt that the gravity in the maze was constantly changing, and there were problems with the space. Black walls appeared and disappeared, making his remaining senses more and more uncomfortable. It was as if he had been stuffed into a washing machine and spun around for 2 days and 2 nights. Because he was very confident in his heaven's forbidden realm. Ordinary legendary professionals could only die here. They could only follow the route that he had planned and slowly die. Come, come, come. Reveal the location of your organization. The next second. At this time, the time assassin, who was also hiding inside, suddenly couldn't help but chuckle. Is this brute finally angry? I think if I torture him for a while more, he will collapse. But his physique is really strong. I hit his heart twice. One of the peak legendary awakeners gently touched the wall with his finger. He had stepped into the saint realm. In particular, the black walls beneath his feet, above his head, and on both sides of his body could attack automatically. TSK, TSK. In an instant, the prince glanced at the dozens of legendary professionals not far away. He grabbed the corpse of the space assassin and the soul that was about to be drawn away by the sticks. After stuffing it back into the corpse, he threw it into the space ring. This wasn't the same as being beaten up by Thor, the god of thunder. Instead, he had nowhere to use his strength and could only be bullied by others. It could even be said, William didn't care as he smashed them into pieces. It was as if he had smashed through a mirror. He allowed the shattered, forbidden magic barriers to pass by him. William did not have absolute confidence in winning against a time element professional. Furthermore, there was a taboo arcane master who could seal his equipment. This was simply raising the difficulty of the novice game to hell. According to the netizens, in B******. In addition, the doors and walls of the labyrinth were constantly changing. This reminded him of an old movie, The Dimensional Dimension, Fatal Formation. A door that looked like black ink appeared, as if it was taking the initiative to invite him in. The taboo arcane master fell silent. The William in front of him made him feel as if he was facing the sword god Eros. According to the real situation, they had low health points and low defense. Unless they had the attributes, equipment, and skills of the male protagonist of the Assassin's Creed. Only stupid NPCs would choose this occupation. The black walls exploded, and the fist shadows did not dissipate for a long time. 3 black walls were destroyed consecutively, and a fist mark was left on the 4th wall before it came to a stop. Fisk, it's really powerful. An endless labyrinth? While William was thinking, the black wall under his feet suddenly disappeared. A huge gravitational force appeared, and he almost fell down. Accompanied by the roar of a peak legendary awakener, dozens of legendary professionals rushed forward at the same time. They did not believe that no matter how fierce this guy was, he could not withstand their joint attack. 3 seconds later, in the next second, he immediately activated the unparalleled Sacred Thunder. He did not manage to catch the target, but his hand still shot out a ray of lightning. With the recoil of the energy shot out, he turned around and charged towards the taboo arcane master. The taboo arcane master acted as if he did not need money, and he threw out a forbidden barrier. As for the temple of the god of massacre at the back of the city, after half of it was destroyed, it was protected by a ray of divine light. Therefore, boom, the god of massacre slowly walked out. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Some legendary awakeners secretly swallowed their saliva. This guy in front of them was very strong. He seemed to have killed a professional with the time element and snatched the soul from his sticks. Many legendary awakeners nodded and waited quietly on the periphery. They didn't believe that there would be any danger outside. As long as they waited patiently, when the domain dissipated, it would be the death of this group of outsiders. However, I believe that you are really stupid. I'll give you another chance. He was being teased. Boom! A huge black chain labyrinth that was tens of thousands of meters in length was formed. It instantly enveloped William and slammed him to the ground. Bang! 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 His eyes flashed with golden light, and his whole body surged with a suffocating aura. Eric, who was hidden in the dark wall, was also on one side. No matter how one looked at it, this was a perfect assassination. His recovery ability and defense ability had skyrocketed. His vision, smell, hearing, and senses had all been weakened by 90%. The data panel could not be wrong. Moreover, it was reasonable to create a virtual online game. How could an assassin, a profession that was hidden in the dark, openly practice? Boom! Now, the taboo arcane master and Eric were also trapped in the labyrinth. But their battle was so fierce that it had already been noticed by the legendary Awakeners in the city. But when the Awakeners arrived, they only saw the indestructible black labyrinth. They did not find any living creatures. But the more it was so, he also fled far away, leaving William and the Awakeners behind. As long as the taboo arcane master did not die, the magic in his body was enough to support the labyrinth. Even if William smashed countless walls, he would only stay in the middle of the labyrinth. It was impossible for a professional of the same level to break through. Swoosh! If it was a space-time professional like Akeler, he would be the natural enemy of the taboo arcane master. The seemingly indestructible black labyrinth walls exploded, but the black fragments that fell to the ground were like liquid. They quickly condensed into a new wall. But this time, Eric spat out blood. He felt the bones in his back shattering. He wanted to take the opportunity to escape. The taboo arcane master did not want him to die, but he felt a sharp pain in his back. The taboo arcane master retreated, and a black barrier appeared in front of him. The Awakener cautiously took a step back. He raised his eyebrows. "Do you want to go in? Did you take the initiative to disperse the forbidden skill and then scram?" Eric had many tricks up his sleeves, but he was still hiding his strength. This made the taboo arcane master feel a deep fear. He even felt that he could not defeat Eric. To be honest at this moment, as long as the black walls were sealed, the sudden explosion of the domain shockwave would not be able to break through the black walls. Instead, it would cause a backlash to William. William would not be heavily injured, but if the taboo arcane master grasped the opportunity, he might die on the spot. Vanishing into thin air, the legend was like an ant. The massacre god turned around and walked back to his temple. It was as if he did not see his temple being destroyed. That was the extremely rare assassin profession. This was the ultimate move of the taboo arcane master. And just a few seconds later, the time assassin attacked 3 times. It was as if he had fallen into an endless abyss. Even though his eyes were emitting lightning, his surroundings were pitch black, and he could not discover anything. He only aimed at one of the black walls. But this heaven's forbidden domain was far more powerful than the dimensional dimension killing formation's Rubik's Cube. William could not move an inch in this labyrinth. Hence, in the next second, bang! The taboo arcane masters had high damage output, but they could not stand still. If they were caught, they would die. More importantly, they had too few training channels. This was the main reason why there were so few of them. The prince frowned and punched the wall with his fist. At that moment, he did not know how many times he had been tied up by the chains. The black walls were still moving. Walls were being rebuilt, and the tunnels were being sealed. Gulp. But this ability has a limit. I have discovered the weakness of the taboo arcane master. He can only use it once every 5 minutes. There is still 1 minute before his ability recovers. If we attack in the last few seconds, he will not be cautious. Be prepared. It was not absolute. This black labyrinth was the domain of the taboo arcane master. It was a very special domain. If one did not have the ability to destroy the entire domain, it would be impossible to break out of this labyrinth. His eyes penetrated countless spaces and looked deeply at the Lord of the City of Dawn. Then, he gently waved his hand. He didn't care about the black chains or the spears that seemed to be quite lethal. The prince's mouth twitched. He had underestimated the abilities of the taboo arcane master. At the same time, the prince turned his head around and punched out. Within a few seconds, he used his other hand to weave a wall made of black chains. It gradually formed a huge black labyrinth. Chains, black spears, and even black walls exploded towards William at the same time. Why were there so few assassins? Were they dual professionals? Thunder roared, and the black walls turned into ashes in an instant. He was sure that if he had been hit by that punch, he would have been turned into a pile of meat paste. He would have died without a complete corpse. He was in America, and he had just gotten off the plane. He had graduated from the Ivy League and was a senior manager at Ubisoft. His annual salary was $1 million USD. According to what he had learned and understood, There was a reason why there were so few assassin NPCs in the virtual world. If he was caught by an official professional, he would definitely be interrogated. Were you trying to rebel or assassinate a noble? Were you trying to be an assassin? A man with an incredulous expression appeared in his vision. He was grabbed by William. Wherever the punch passed, the Forbidden Sky domain disappeared. He did not know how many black barbs had pierced through his body. Smoke and dust flew everywhere, and cracks appeared on the ground. This was definitely the most difficult battle in William's life. More importantly, he understood. He understood this. After all, his resurrection armor was sealed and could not be used at all. It was best to be careful. He was powerful, invincible, and fearless. William did not give him a chance. He took a step forward and appeared in front of Isaac. His fingers were like hooks as he forcefully pressed Isaac's head down. Someone shook his head and said, "It's not necessary. It's normal for this group of outsiders to fight among themselves. Don't forget that they might be setting up a trap to lure us in and kill us." Meanwhile, William activated the power of the Saint Spirit. A drop of blood essence fused into his body. Why did he not activate the Thunder Domain to resist? In short, most beginner NPCs did not have the means to become assassins. They would usually choose to be warriors or mages. That familiar yet strange aura made him tremble from the bottom of his heart. How many years has it been? The Taboo Master suddenly laughed at himself. It had been a long time since he had experienced such a feeling. The black wall beneath his feet shattered, and the two of them plummeted down like meteors. But their screams and collisions reverberated in the labyrinth. His soul perception spread out, and a three-dimensional image appeared in his mind. Even the black walls could not stop the Saint's spirit from penetrating them. Even the slightest change was very obvious. It was as if everything was moving in slow motion. It was not a problem of the Peak Sage aura. It was made of wood. The Taboo Master, who was controlling the situation, gulped. It was no wonder that Sacred Armor and the other two had strongly invited William to join the murderous temple. William was indeed strong. Even if he did not use any equipment, he could still unleash unimaginable killing power. The Forbidden Sky Labyrinth. The side effects of activating the Peerless Temple have made you feel good. Do you really feel safe with the god of massacre behind your back? William took a deep breath and gently held his forehead. The more he felt indignant, the more indignant he was. The Taboo Master took a deep breath and started to use all the techniques in the Heaven's Forbidden Domain. While he triggered various traps, he let Ike continue to attack. In addition, that strange person had given up on killing him. It was obvious that Ike was very strong, but he seemed to have used some forbidden skills, and all his attributes had suddenly dropped. This was definitely the best opportunity to kill him. Or should I use all my strength to capture you and kill you? That was right. The Taboo Master saw that William was seriously injured, but he did not care and flew towards him. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. After William was trapped in the Forbidden Labyrinth, he knew that he had fallen into the Heaven's Forbidden Domain. He immediately discovered that this labyrinth was extraordinary. A normal labyrinth was a plan, but the power of William's punch had frightened Ike. If he was not a time assassin, he would not have been able to dodge that attack. William's ring shone slightly. The last assassination attack had cut open William's heart, causing his health points to drop by 70%. If not for the activation of the Fight to Death endowment, which increased his defense and health points, William was sure that the time assassin would have continued to attack. He would not have concealed his killing aura and disappeared into the black walls again. The Taboo Master did not speak. After some mental calculations, he suddenly said, "Attack." Chapter 583. William had killed a legendary time assassin, but he had been tricked by a forbidden arcane master. He had no choice but to use a drop of his father's blood essence to clear the place. He had considered the possibility of getting into big trouble. For example, he had accidentally hammered the temple, but when the god of massacre walked out, he only glanced at William indifferently before turning around and leaving. Yes, it was as if he did not see William and did not realize that his grave had been destroyed. He just went back like that. Is he blind? Or does he think that the temple will automatically recover after an hour? Is he going to ignore me? William was a little dazed. He wanted to grab the god of massacre by his collar and ask him what was the meaning of this. Was he looking down on William? Ahem, forget it. He's a god after all. Perhaps his injuries have not fully recovered. I'll give him some face. William stroked his chin and turned to leave. He decided to take advantage of the fact that his father's power had not dissipated to kill all the awakeners that he had discovered. He wanted to maximize his benefits. The time on the data panel was passing quickly. William flew around the small world of the Nether God. Besides encountering some professionals, he did not encounter any other dangers. For a guy like him, whose luck was equal to 2, to be so lucky, it was obvious that the Goddess of Death's crystal map had played a big role. With his comprehensive map, he could easily avoid those unknown dangers. For example, the temples of other gods and the hiding places of the Nether God. There were certain taboos in the small world of the Nether God. You could offend anyone, but you must not offend the Nether God who did not care about you. The Lord of the small world was in existence at the level of the Lord of the Nether God. Even though he was removing his belief and recovering from his injuries, he was not someone that they could easily offend. The locations that the Nether God might appear on the crystal map were definitely places that William could not avoid. There were places that he could not run to even if he was beaten to death. As the version 5.0 update started, William disappeared for a full 7 months. Not only did he miss the world competition, but he also did not have the chance to send the players off. Fortunately, the Chosen One competition was still held for the second time under Annie's management. Although the majority of the players were curious about where he had gone, they could only choose to forget about it. After all, the NPCs of the City of Dawn were very tight-lipped. It was impossible for them to leak any information. However, before the version update, the version 4.0 World Finals still made everyone tremble in fear. Because before the world competition, glory teams had been crazily influenced by others, causing the mentality of the team members to change. They had been able to fight their way to the world competition, but it had been a bumpy ride. Practically no team, host, or player expected them to win the championship again. But when they entered the semi-finals of the quarterfinals, they once again returned to their previous state. The arrogant and courageous glory team had once again returned. They were the third-seeded team in the Huaxia region and won the championship trophy in the world competition. At that moment, all public opinion disappeared. The only words left on the forums were "Glory is awesome." In fact, Chu Liuqiu and the others knew better than anyone else that if they wanted to make those people who were leading them disappear, they would have to use their own strength to win the championship. Because the weight of a championship trophy was heavier and more important than anything else. The winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. These simple words, no matter what era it was, would always be an unchanging truth. After that, Chu Liuqiu also announced on the forums that he would be retiring in the next version. Although this matter caused many people to discuss it, they all wished him a successful retirement. It could be said that Chu Liuqiu had led Glory to 4 consecutive championships in the World League. It was a great courage for him to announce his retirement at such a time, because everyone knew that even if he continued to do so, he would still have fans supporting him and he would still be able to earn a lot of money. However, when Chu Liuqiu sensed that he was not at his peak, he took the initiative to retire. He even gave the position of team leader to Changli Jioga, who was performing better and better. This was the most admirable thing about him. The players had once again left the God's world. This news attracted the attention of many NPCs. However, many sages were still unable to predict when the Chosen One would appear again. This version update would last for a full 10 years. The most important thing during this period was that the 7 continents would slowly merge together. Of course, it was not a complete merger yet. However, the distance between the 7 continents would not exceed 1,000 nautical miles. This short distance was nothing to professionals and magical warships. Conclusion: the war between the 7 continents was about to begin. The Third Darkness invasion was about to begin. If version 4.0 was the starting point of the Endless War, then version 5.0 Zero would be the climax of the endless war. Because version 5, Zero would last for a full 5 years. It would be a full 5 years of endless war. During that period of time, the gods' continent was in a terrible state. Countless races, animals, and magical beasts died because of the war. According to the final statistics, in the 5 years of version 5, Zero, more than 30 billion creatures died. More importantly, in these 5 years, there were many holy wars. Many powerful forces were destroyed, and many more forces took the opportunity to rise. At this moment, William had stayed in the small world of the underworld god for more than half a year. He had basically run through all the cities of the 4 gods, and he had harvested all the wool that he could. Not only had he harvested the wool of many places, but he had also harvested the wool of others many times. Should I go to the remaining 5 forbidden areas? William gulped. What level was he now? He was a full level 230. He had gone from a LV 180 legendary newbie all the way to LV 230. This super VIP leveling area was simply amazing. But the remaining 5 forbidden areas had been marked by the goddess of death. These places were places where the underworld god might appear. If the underworld god was not around, everyone could happily raid the forbidden areas. As long as they did not go overboard, the underworld god would not kill them. But if they really encountered the underworld god in the forbidden areas, even if a sage came, it would be useless. Even if William summoned Odin, it would be of no use. It would be as if the 2 of them had wasted their efforts. So he had not decided whether he should go and test the waters. William hesitated for a long time. He glanced at the map again. Forbidden Land. That's right. 5 of the Forbidden Lands are places where the god of the underworld might appear. But the death goddess didn't mark that the god of the underworld would go to the Forbidden Land, the Styx River. It seems like I can go there. William scratched his head. Or rather, he felt that the underworld river seemed to be very beneficial to his sub-occupation. The underworld river. The power of reincarnation. The saint's soul magic that he cultivated had the ability to revive the dead. It seemed to have the same effect as the underworld river. Let's go and take a look. Anyway, I won't suffer any losses. Chapter 584. The Styx River had no source and was endless. This meant that the Styx River had no source and no end. It was like the river of time and was one of the laws of the god's world. However, the Styx River was not as mysterious as the river of time. The Styx River's function was simple. It allowed living beings who had reached the end of their lifespans to die, and then allowed their souls to return to their original point and be reborn in a fetus. The Styx River's laws covered a vast area. The god's world, the dark world, the abyss world, the 3 moons, and the small worlds that had not completely escaped the river of time were all included. As long as they were not existences that were outside of the 3 realms and did not belong to the 5 elements, as long as they could escape the control of the river of time, they would be able to step into the sage realm. They would be considered immortals, and these high-level living beings would completely escape the Styx River's restraints. Even if they were reincarnated, they would be able to retain a portion of their origin energy and memories when passing through the Styx River. This was one of the reasons why there were so many reincarnated gods. The Styx River was located in the mysterious space between the god's world and the dark world. Other than the souls of the dead, who could be attracted by the mysterious pulling force, only sages could get close or enter it. As for the Netherworld River in this small world, it was actually just a tributary. It also possessed a certain amount of the Netherworld River's abilities, but its use was limited to that. Just like the Mobius ring, it flowed continuously in a cycle in the small world. No matter what, even if it was a tributary of the Styx River, ordinary legendary experts would not be able to get close to it. According to the Death Goddess description, even if the underworld god dragged out a tributary of the Styx River, he would not be able to make use of it. In the end, he could only escape the loophole of the river of time and find a way to devour the origin energy of the Styx River. The underworld god's real name was Cypher Styx. His natural endowment was reincarnation. He was one of the most powerful main gods in the mythological era. William stood not far from the Styx River and looked at the surging red river water. He did not need to get too close to it to feel the boundless, deathly aura. It was as if he stepped into it, he would immediately turn into thick water and become one with it. However, this is only a branch of the Styx River. In my previous life, after Lancelot was captured, he was also imprisoned in the Styx River by the Viscount of Darkness. He didn't die completely in the main vein of the Styx River. I don't believe that he will die here. William took a deep breath and strode forward. As he got closer to the river Styx, he could clearly sense the aura of impending death. It was like the goddess of death was waving at him. MMP. The scene suddenly changed because the goddess of death was waving at him without any threat at all. After all, would you be afraid of a big-breasted female slave waving at you? But then again, when William was about to step into the Styx River, the suffocating aura suddenly disappeared. However, there was still danger, but it was not as fatal as before. The current Styx branch was like a wounded wild dog. It looked very powerful, but it was actually weak on the inside. Its barks were quite scary, but if you really charged at it with an AK-47, it would be so scared that it would crawl away. I guessed right. The real Styx River is very fatal to me, but the tributary of the Styx River is still far from it. William frowned and stepped into the tributary. Splash! The crimson water splashed up, and his heel sank into the water. William raised his eyebrows. His elemental armor was being corroded. The speed of the corrosion was not fast, but it was still a serious injury to the elemental armor. William decisively activated his battle energy shield. The sizzling sound was heard again. The corrosion was causing 3,000 damage points per second. It was not the upper limit of the battle energy shield, but it was much faster than his recovery speed. Hence, William stripped naked and plunged into the crimson Styx River. He tried to find the object that was very attractive to him. The sizzling sound of corrosion was heard again. William's health points kept dropping, but every time the Styx River dealt a small amount of damage to him, it would activate the Heart of Thunder, which allowed his health points to recover at an astonishing speed. Besides the burning pain all over his body, the Styx River could not cause him to lose 1% of his health points. It cannot be helped. Besides the explosive damage of an assassin, the continuous damage was useless against him. The Styx River was thousands of meters wide, and its depth was unbelievable. It was like a bottomless pit. William's eyes flashed with lightning, and he continued to let his body dive deeper. Very soon, when the depth reached about 300 meters, he sensed that something was wrong. He sensed the aura of souls, or rather, he was surrounded by souls wandering in the river. They were densely packed and endless. It was a scene that could kill a trypophobia patient on the spot. This group of souls came in all shapes and sizes. There were males and females, old and young, and all sorts of races. They were the souls of the creatures in this small world. They were unaware and did not move. It was as if their eyes were wide open. They drifted with the waves like vegetables. There was no end, no direction, and no purpose, until the Styx River followed its own rules and reincarnated them. However, it seemed that due to the problems of the River of Time, the rules of the Styx River had also gone wrong. That was, these souls would not be completely cleansed into an unconscious infant state. Instead, they would be thrown into the body of a dead person, and they would be revived. They would even have the memories of their previous life, and some instincts would not be erased. More importantly, when they left the Styx River, they would bring along some of the source power of the Styx River. The source power was the experience points that William had mentioned. It was also the source of energy in the eyes of other NPC professionals. But when William saw them swimming past him, he felt a chill in his heart. He did not intend to use his soul magic to provoke them. After all, he knew too little about the Styx River. It would not be good if he angered these seemingly weak souls or provoked the rules of the Styx River. But with the spirit of scientific research, he took out a magic bottle and attempted to store some of the river water, the kind that did not contain souls. It was a pity. The legendary magic bottle in his hand could not store the river water. Although the Styx River looked like river water, It was more like the materialization of the reincarnation power. It could not be stored in the magic bottle. But as he continued to go deeper, he gradually reached the bottom of the Styx River. He saw a group of living creatures. That was right. They were a group of living creatures that had souls, could speak, and were conscious. They seemed to be in charge of the order of the Styx River. They captured some souls that had drifted to the bottom of the Styx River. After needing them, they stuffed them into a container and brought them away. The way this group of people worked was like street cleaners. But the cleaners were in charge of cleaning up the trash. They seemed to be in charge of cleaning up the mentally retarded souls at the bottom of the river. But no matter how William imagined, he did not expect this group of dwarfs to all look like small mermen. The small mermen in freshwater rivers, lakes often had light green skin, and their average height was less than 1 meter. The small mermen in the sea all had blue skin, and their average height was close to 2 meters. So they were called big mermen. Of course, it did not mean that the small mermen only had these 2 colors of skin. They would change according to different environments. But this change was too big. Their entire bodies were blood red, and their average height was 34 meters. Their originally blood-red eyes had become black, and their pupils were so large that they could even glow. Luckily, the bone trident never left his hand. Otherwise, William would not have recognized their race. As expected of the gods' world, where there are small mermen wherever there is water. The players did not give the small merman that title for nothing. What is that title again? Oh, it's the Lord of the Gods continent. Yes, no matter how many eras have passed in the Gods continent, the small mermen have always maintained the #1 advantage in terms of population. They have never fallen to second place. They are simply the leaders of the intelligent races. But are they also in charge of the Styx River? The prince swallowed his saliva and suddenly felt a headache, because in his heart, the small mermen were clearly the dregs of the gods' world. They were the lowest existences among all the races. They usually lived by eating fish or eating the corpses of wild beasts and magical beasts, or forming groups to sneak up on some creatures that were alone. But then again, no matter where they are, they seem to be doing the work of picking up trash. It's like they are at the bottom of the food chain. William observed in the dark. This team of hundreds of small mermen were happily picking up all the souls that had sunk to the bottom of the river. One of the small mermen captain took out a soul fragment from a container and stuffed it into his mouth to eat. When some of the small mermen saw this, they could only lick their lips. They were angry, but they did not dare to say anything. He had no choice. He believed that if he dared to say a word, the captain would immediately skin him alive. The prince raised his eyebrows. The small mermen in the Styx River feed on souls. Their structure is very strange. Let's follow them and see where they live. William did not act rashly. He chose to secretly tail the small mermen. After all, this group of small mermen were not very smart. It seemed that they had no way of discovering him. Oh, in fact, the overall strength of the small mermen in the Styx River was not weak. On average, they had the strength of an advanced professional. The small captain was a grandmaster. TSK. Will I be able to see a sage merman? William raised his eyebrows. In the gods' continent, it was actually only a legend. Ahem. In the endless sea region, there was a sage merman hiding in the deep sea. Ever since he had stepped into the sage realm, he had never appeared on the surface of the sea. His whereabouts were secretive, and it was extremely difficult to discover him. Don't ask why he did not dare to appear. He had no choice. Small mermen. They were the weakest existence among the sages. Furthermore, there were also sages. If he killed one, he would definitely obtain great benefits and glory. William looked a little excited. If he really encountered a sage merman in the Styx River, he might be able to kill the sage. For a moment, the prince was wild with joy. Not to mention other things, even if he could not kill the merman now, in the future, if he was really unlucky when he stepped into the sage realm and had to fight a sage alone, nothing would be easier than fighting a sage merman. Chapter 585. The small mermen in the Styx River did not live on the surface. They fed on broken souls and lived in the underground caves of the Styx River. If the archaeologists from the world of gods discovered them, they would definitely name them the Styx Cave Mermen. This group of small, blood-red mermen seem to have really been born and died in the Nether River. In fact, because they lived in the Nether River, they were not affected by time. Their skin was naturally resistant to the corrosion of the river water, but they would never explore the outside world for their entire lives. It was like the Styx River used its power of rules to create this group of small mermen, but it castrated their desire to explore the outside world. Their corpses would be eaten by their own kind after they died. Hence, the small mermen in the Styx River were also omnivores. William had captured a Grandmaster Merman and used soul control to inquire about this situation. Then, when the prince discovered that there was an epic-ranked leader of the small mermen in this tribe, his eyes lit up, and he decided to find the largest tribe of the small mermen in the Styx to see if there were any small mermen with holy positions. This was because after the little manfish that he controlled was killed, he realized that the souls of these little manfish were actually somewhat similar to his holy soul magic. It seemed like this was the reason why he felt an indescribable attraction to the Netherworld River. Time continued to pass. William wandered in the entire Styx River. He discovered that tribes of various sizes would appear at the bottom of the Styx River every 30 miles, 100 miles, and 300 miles. A large tribe of small mermen usually had 70,000 to 80,000 small mermen. The most powerful chief was an epic professional. In a small and medium-sized tribe, the most powerful small mermen were the Grandmaster Mermen. However, as he continued to wander, he discovered that the souls in a part of the river were extremely congested. He really found a large tribe of small mermen. There were tens of thousands of small mermen living here. They diligently and honestly searched for the souls that had sunk to the bottom of the river. They needed the souls and stuffed them into containers to be brought back to the tribe as food. When William saw this situation, he used the beast god necklace to transform himself into a small loach. He attached himself to a soul container and followed a small team of soul collectors back to the tribe. Soon, His Royal Highness arrived at this large fishman tribe. What surprised him was that the inferior manfish here did not live in caves. Instead, they lived in a dilapidated underwater city. There were even some palaces here. And the strongest person in this tribe was only a legendary merman. Little Loach William opened his eyes wide and looked at the dilapidated palace in front of him. He discovered that this seemingly large palace seemed to have been built by the small merman and not some god's temple. Whether it was the palace, the walls, or the statues of the little merman in the plaza, they all indicated that this was once the remains of a little merman empire. Although there were tens of millions of inferior manfish living here, they were obviously the inheritors of this palace, not the creators. TSK, this is getting interesting. Could it be that there really were sage little mermen living here in the past? Or could it be that there should have been sage little mermen here before this tributary was pulled away by the nether god? William swayed his tail and swayed as he swam toward a large hall. His target was the legendary inferior manfish, because William sensed that the inferior manfish seemed to have the aura of a saint or god. It was not a living thing. It was a dead thing, like some kind of divine weapon or sacred weapon. The prince was an excellent ranger, and with the help of the magic guide scroll, he could transform into an assassin. He planned to open locks, steal treasure chests, and so on. Very soon, William nimbly snuck into the palace and rushed toward the big treasure in the palace. It was a pity. A pair of eyes noticed him. His stealth failed, but William instantly activated his peerless skill. There was a tragic scream. The legendary inferior manfish and the leader of the tens of millions of inferior manfish tribe died in an instant. More importantly, the divine weapon that was worshipped by the inferior manfish had been taken away by the villains. For a moment, the inferior manfish tribe with tens of millions of people was in a mess. The epic small manfish started to divide their subordinates and form new tribes. Outside the Styx, William did not expect his 3-day trip to the Styx to be so successful. Not only did he discover the existence of the inferior manfish in the Styx, but he also easily obtained a rare treasure. This item was not a divine weapon that could increase a person's combat power. It was a strategic world treasure. 2 words. It was a huge gain. William could not even imagine how the inferior manfish had obtained such a treasure. But after thinking about it carefully, he understood. In the past, when he was at the main vein of the Styx, there must have been a sage realm, small manfish living here. This divine weapon should have belonged to him. But back then, the Styx had forcefully pulled out a branch of the Styx. Although the sage realm small manfish had resisted, he was no match for the Styx and died. In addition, the god of the underworld was a god, so he was not interested in investigating the treasures of the inferior manfish. Instead, he allowed the strategic divine weapon to remain in the branch of the Styx and was worshipped by the inferior manfish. Although it seemed easy for William to enter the Styx, it was difficult for other legendary professionals to have such strength. Simply put, the gods did not like to come to this branch of the Styx. They were not interested in searching for treasures. Legendary professionals could not come even if they wanted to. That was why William was so lucky. Come, let me see how powerful this treasure is. William's eyes flashed as he carefully examined the strange ring in his hand. Ring of reincarnation quality, world treasure materials, unknown creator, Styx usage restriction, legendary professionals, and above special effect, immortality. As long as you were the ring of reincarnation at all times, the Styx will not pose any threat to you. Skill, holy soul baptism. The greatest secret of immortality is to have a holy soul that will never age. The ring of reincarnation can perform 1 to 3 soul baptism on any professional. There is a certain chance that the essence of the soul will be sublimated and a certain amount of lifespan will be increased. There's a certain chance that the soul endowment will be activated. There is a certain chance that the soul immortality will be achieved. Cooldown, 24 hours restriction. After more than 3 soul baptisms, unexpected things may happen. Skill, reincarnation. A living creature whose soul is not damaged can be directly reincarnated without borrowing the power of the Styx. A part of the original power can be preserved and most of the memories of the previous life can be retained. Restriction. This skill is not considered as possession. The user can only reincarnate into the body of an unborn baby. Restriction. The reincarnation of souls of different races may cause unexpected consequences. Restriction. A soul can be reincarnated for every 10,000 battle energy and magic value consumed. 1 special effect. 2 skills. It could almost be said that the power of the ring of reincarnation was simply unimaginable. William was so excited that he was going crazy. This was a godly weapon that could extend one's lifespan. As long as he took out this godly weapon, a group of dying legendary professionals would definitely kneel down and beg him to use it on them. But he also discovered a problem. The immortality of the soul was actually very bad. Even if the soul of a legendary professional obtained immortality, the physical body would continue to decay. This might be even more unbearable. But the ring of reincarnation gave him an answer. But now I have to hide this godly weapon. Unless I become a sage, I must definitely not take it out. I can't let others discover it. William narrowed his eyes. He was so excited that he could not express it in words. He had explored this small world enough. Next, he would go into seclusion and sleep. He promised that he would not explore the remaining 5 forbidden areas.